I was standing in my own bedroom, completely naked, pressing a light switch like it owed me money. Click, light on. Click, light off. Perfectly normal apartment, perfectly normal Tuesday, except for the glowing blue panel floating in front of my face telling me that 8 billion people had just been deployed into a survival world. All of humanity. Every grandma, every infant, every guy mid-shower. The whole species yanked into the dark. And me? I pulled back the curtain and looked outside. Empty streets. Dead city. Not one soul. You teleported all of humanity and didn't take me with you? That's how my apocalypse started. Not with a bang, with me getting left at the station, holding my pants. My name is Lin Wei, 22 years old, fresh graduate, professional reader of things nobody asked me to read. The system panel in front of me said I had 1 hour to use something called a shelter ticket, or I'd lose my survivor status. It also listed my stats. Strength 4.6, Constitution 4.2. Average person is a 4. So physically, I was a slightly above average noodle. My talent, though. My talent was called Learning Yields Results. Guaranteed minimum return on any studying. Improved concentration. 8 billion people got dropped into a death game, and the system handed me a library card. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. The chat channel was already melting down. 100,000 people in my region, all screaming into the void at once. It's pitch black. I can't see anything. Where am I? Dad! One guy cast a fireball with his fire talent and reported seeing a building. Another guy built his shelter immediately and got a thatched hut with an oil lamp and a wishing well. The picture came together fast. Everyone else was in a world of absolute darkness, groping around blind, and shelters came with light. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my fully lit apartment on Earth, eating everything in my fridge because I am not an idiot. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to happen on a full stomach. Then I did the math. My talent rewards learning. What's the one building in this city that is basically a talent-shaped temple? The provincial library. Biggest one for 1,000 kilometers, 10 minutes from my house. I sprinted there, looted a convenience store and a hardware store on the way. Canned food, bottled water, rope, lighters, a folding knife, and stood in the Grand Central Hall with my shelter ticket in my fist and 4 minutes on the clock, grinning like a man who had just outplayed God. Everyone else gets a random hut. I get a library. Millions of books. The entire accumulated knowledge of human civilization as my starter kit. I know this genre. Everyone's surviving in another world. I'm stuck on Earth with all the resources of a modern industrial civilization. That's not a horror story. That's a cheat code with my name on it. Use the shelter ticket. Location, right here. The ticket sank into the floor. The shelter began generating. And then something cold and enormous grabbed me and ripped me out of the world. Absolute darkness swallowed everything. Light, sound, temperature, direction, gone. The air smelled like fish and rot and wet dirt. My system panel twitched. An unknown error has been detected. Fixed. Fixed. The system looked at the bug that left me on Earth, grabbed me by the collar, dragged me into the dark world, and left my brand new shelter behind. On Earth. In another universe. With all my food, my water, my tools, and every book I'd been planning to weaponize, I stood in the blackness and checked my pockets. 1 folding knife, 1 half-drunk bottle of AD calcium milk, 1 sausage. I asked the system for a complaints department. It answered with 1 line. The unknown bug has been fixed, survivor. Please fend for yourself. Fend for yourself. The system stole my house, dumped me in a lightless monster world with a sausage, and told me to fend for myself. I sat down on the invisible ground and typed into the regional channel, very casually, that a friend of mine was asking what to do if your shelter was, hypothetically, lost. The channel replied with 3 question marks and a pick it up. Thanks, guys. Huge help. Here's the thing about absolute darkness that no game ever prepared you for. It's not just that you can't see, it eats sound. It eats time. After 20 minutes, you start hearing your own heartbeat like a drum solo. After 30, some ancient part of your brain that remembers being prey starts whispering that something is standing right behind you. The chat said monsters were out here. The chat said the guy who went exploring had his avatar go gray 2 minutes later. Gray avatar means dead. The counter in the corner had already dropped by hundreds. The system, in its infinite generosity, distributed 2 basic skill books to everyone. I felt them materialize in my arms. Gathering, appraisal, 2 books. In a world where I couldn't see the books, I did the only rational thing available. I took off my shirt, strapped 1 book to my chest and 1 to my back as armor, and put my shirt back on. A thick book has some defensive value. That was my entire military doctrine at that point. Literacy as body armor. Then I saw it. Far off in the black, a white dot, tiny, stubborn. I closed my eyes, opened them, turned my head. Still there, not a hallucination. The only light in my entire universe. Standing up and walking toward it would be suicide. Can't see the ground, can't see the holes, can't see whatever has teeth. So I made a command decision that I want the record to show was tactically brilliant and not at all humiliating. I got on all fours and crawled, knife in my sleeve, sausage in my pocket. A 22-year-old man crawling sideways through an alien hellscape like a confused crab toward a dot of light, while 8 billion people's worth of chat scrolled in the corner of his vision. Somewhere in that chat, a guy named Chen Hao tagged me. He'd gone out from his shelter, opened a treasure chest, stood up, and could no longer find his own front door. Then he dropped his oil lamp and the oil ran out. We became friends the way two men in adjacent quicksand pits become friends. At least you still have light, he typed. I didn't bring a light, I typed back. I can't see anything. I'm crawling on the ground. The channel went silent for a second, then flooded with question marks. Fine, laugh it up. You're all going to be taking notes later. While I crawled, I read. The forum had come alive. Humans are unbelievable. 2 hours into the apocalypse, and somebody had already posted a monster encyclopedia with 17 entries. Zombies. Slow, flammable, low danger. Skeletons. Ranged attack. 10-meter range, which is longer than your lamplight, so by the time you see the arrow, you're already wearing it. Some bird thing that hunts in flocks. The safest monster on the whole list could still kick me to death like a stray dog. I memorized all 17 and kept crawling. Then, a private message. A polite one, which, in an apocalypse, is immediately suspicious. Joe Kai. Representative of something called the Mutual Aid Society, the people behind that monster encyclopedia. They were researching the effects of prolonged exposure to absolute darkness, and I, the shelterless wonder, was their only living test subject who met the criteria. Would I kindly report any anomalies? I told him the truth. About an hour in the dark, some psychological discomfort, heat loss, otherwise fine. There was a long pause, during which I assume he scrolled up, read, "I'm crawling on the ground," and quietly revised his assessment of my sanity. Then I asked him for the favor that changed my entire life. Could you photograph the pages of the 2 basic skill books and send them to me? I'm bored. I'm bored. That's what I said. Crawling through the void between monsters, and my official request to the most powerful organization in the region was reading material. He sent the photos. And this is where my talent woke up and cracked its knuckles. Because here's what I'd realized. The skill books the system hands out aren't magic scrolls, they're textbooks, actual condensed subjects. The appraisal book had chapters on cognition, judgment, discrimination, reasoning. 20 chapters, simple to complex, properly structured. And if it's a textbook, then you don't need to consume the book. You can just study it. I read chapter 1 off a photograph while crawling on my elbows. 10 minutes later, my panel chimed. Your appraisal technique has been upgraded. No book consumed. No resources spent. I just learned it, like a person. My talent guaranteed returns on learning, and the system counted self-study as legitimate skill progression. Somewhere on the forum, a master's student with a learning talent had discovered the same thing and posted about it through tears. He'd ground out half of level 0 in 6 hours and called it the hardest thing he'd ever done. I finished chapter 2 before my arms cramped. That was the moment the whole game quietly flipped. Everyone else in this world had to kill monsters for experience or burn rare skill books. I could sit in the dark with a photograph and get stronger. Knowledge was lying around this world like unsecured cash, and I was the only one who'd realized the doors weren't locked. Meanwhile, Chen Hao's saga was reaching its finale. He'd fallen down a slope, escaped a monster, and, inspired by my example, he proudly announced, started crawling too. My first disciple. He crawled until his hands found something huge, cold, and metallic in the darkness. A treasure chest, he thought. He felt around for the opening, giddy, thanking heaven for his luck. Then the ground stood up. 2 red lights ignited above him like landing beacons, and the treasure chest turned out to be the combat boot of a giant 7 or 8 meters tall. His last message cut off mid-sentence. His avatar went gray. The channel posted a few condolences and moved on within a minute, because 3,000 people were already dead and grief had gotten expensive. I stopped crawling for a moment, held my sausage a little tighter, then kept going, because the dot of light hadn't gotten any closer and the dark didn't care about my feelings. Joe Kai messaged again. His society had gotten a photo of one of the giants from a player with a stealth talent, the only survivor of the attempt. The picture showed something 10 meters tall that the forum was calling a border guard. They patrolled about 3 kilometers out from the shelters, he said. Whatever you do, don't stray too far from your shelter. My shelter was in another universe. Understood, I typed, and kept crawling in whatever direction this world considered too far. 6 hours. 6 hours of elbows and gravel and skinned palms, reading the whole way, leveling appraisal to 5. And with every level, something strange happened that the system panel didn't mention. I got sharper. Observation, attention to detail, spatial estimation, actual cognitive upgrades. Because I hadn't downloaded the skill, I'd understood it. The knowledge was mine, wired in, load-bearing. And then the light was finally in front of me, and I stood up for the first time in 6 hours like a man reinventing bipedalism and looked at what I'd crossed a sea of darkness to reach. A ruined stone gateway, standing alone in the wasteland, with a soft glowing orb floating above it. Words appeared as I approached. Dungeon, Wizard's Abandoned Experiment Field. Recommended level 0 to 5. Enter? No. I sat down next to it instead. I had 0 information, 0 resources, a knife, and half a sausage. I know how dungeons work in stories. The people who charge in blind are the ones whose gray avatars teach everyone else the mechanics. I would enter that dungeon when I was out of food and options, and not 1 second before. Besides, I had studying to do. I messaged Joe Kai with a business proposal. Your society photographs every skill book you can find and sends me the pictures. In exchange, when I finally enter this dungeon, the first dungeon anyone in the region had found, you get every scrap of intelligence from inside. He went quiet for a minute, clearly running it up the chain of command, then came back with an enthusiastic yes and photos of 4 skill books. Basic body strengthening, frost arrow, shield, meditation. The regional channel, meanwhile, had adopted me as a mascot. The only survivor with no shelter, no light, and no visible survival strategy, who somehow refused to die and kept posting from the void. People tagged me constantly. Someone offered me their spare oil lamps. Someone offered me, and I quote, a used stocking from a pretty girl. Someone else offered their own original flavor, and I had to establish a strict no men policy on donations. Idiots. My idiots. In a world where 3,000 people died in the first hours, the regional channel had decided that laughing at the crawling man was a load-bearing pillar of collective sanity, and honestly, I was happy to hold the roof up. So there I sat, in the little pool of dungeon light at the edge of the world, and I studied. Basic Body Strengthening, Chapter 1. The moment the system certified it, warmth flooded my limbs, and then a hunger hit me so hard my vision went black. Constitution up 0.1, paid for out of my own body's energy reserves. The system doesn't create muscle from nothing, it just skips the 6 months of gym and sends you the bill immediately. Noted, leveling body skills on an empty stomach is a creative form of suicide. Meditation, Chapter 1. This one was different, weirder. Circulating awareness, sensing elements, drawing energy inward. It read like Taoist internal alchemy that had passed a physics review. When the system certified it, something tore loose in my head, a pump switching on, and a brand new line appeared on my panel. Magic, 1. Magic attribute activated, 1 point of magic. Somewhere out there, people with fire talents were being born with 10, but they'd been given theirs. I'd built mine, in the dark, out of a photograph. And a thing you build, you can build again, and again, and again. Then I opened the photo of Frost Arrow. The system graded out immediately, class incompatible, cannot be used. The skill sat on my panel, sealed, unusable through any button the system would give me. But here's the thing the system didn't understand about what I'd been doing. I hadn't installed Frost Arrow. I'd learned it. I understood the principles, the energy flow, the shaping. The system could lock its button. It could not unteach me physics. I raised my hand in the dark and pushed magic through the model in my head, manually, no system assistance, like doing long division after they take away your calculator. Frost crackled across the stone next to me, weak, pathetic, honestly, 10 seconds of effort to chill a rock, half my magic gone. Good for refrigerating a cola, useless in a fight. But it worked. The locks on this world were decorative. I sat back against the ruined gate, alone at the bottom of a universe with no sun, and for the first time since the system stole my house, I smiled. The system had taken my library. Fine, I was going to read this entire world instead. The next few days, I built a routine that I'm going to describe honestly, even though it sounds insane. I sat in the dark next to a dungeon I refused to enter, reading photographs, while the rest of humanity speed ran the apocalypse around me. And humanity, I have to say, delivered. Day one wasn't even over before the first war criminal of the new economy showed up. The initial 6 hours of free shelter lighting ran out, everyone's oil lamps started dying, and the darkness, the real, sanity-eating darkness, came for 100,000 people at once. Wood wouldn't burn out there. The world didn't permit it. Oil was the only light, and suddenly a listing appeared on the market. Lamp oil, large quantity, highest bidder wins. Seller, Guo Tian. 3 units of wood for 1 unit of oil, then 5. The channel filled with people begging and people cursing, and Guo Tian answered all of them with the serene cruelty of a man holding the only water in a desert. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. DM me if you have skill books, price negotiable. The Mutual Aid Society tried diplomacy. Joe Kai messaged him about fair pricing and long-term cooperation, and got back a smiley face and the words, "Scarcity drives value, Mr. Joe." So the society did something better than diplomacy. They posted a guide titled How to Provide Light Without Oil Lamps, and the answer was so beautiful I laughed alone in the dark. Your house can burn. Monsters won't attack shelters during the safe period, so dismantle your own shelter, plank by plank, and burn it for light. They handed out free tinder to the whole region and crashed Guo Tian's monopoly in one afternoon. Guo Tian's response, in the channel, was to declare this an act of war against his livelihood. Someone pointed out that his listed grievance, cutting off my livelihood is like killing my parents, rang a little hollow since his classmate had just outed him as an orphan. He logged off. Remember that name, by the way, Guo Tian. The forum had him pegged within a day. Nobody sells thousands of units of anything without a cheat, and sure enough, his talent multiplied a random item he owned 1,000-fold every single day. 1,000 skill books, 1,000 ammo boxes, the classic protagonist starter pack. The channel was half in awe, half in terror of him. Me? I looked at his stats and his attitude and made a note in my mental file. Stay away from that man. In every story I've ever read, that's the protagonist build, the golden finger, the arrogance, the drama magnetically attaching itself to him. And when I looked around at my own situation, no villains harassing me, no rivals scheming, a support society politely mailing me textbooks, a whole channel of goofballs donating oil lamps, the deduction wrote itself. Case solved, I'm not the main character. I'm a background NPC with a good work ethic. Best news I'd gotten all week. Main characters get tribulations, background NPCs get left alone to study, and study I did. When my food ran out on day 2, the sausage went first, mourned briefly but deeply. I finally stood in front of that glowing orb, took one long look at the darkness behind me, and used the entry ticket the system had mailed me as compensation for the little incident of stealing my home. You have entered the dungeon, Wizard's Abandoned Experiment Field. Maximum stay, 48 hours. Completion condition, defeat experiment 003. The light hit me first, actual light, then the smell, grass, soil, water. I was standing at the edge of a forest with a stream running through it, sunlight pouring down like it was free, and somewhere behind me, a stone prison entrance full of monsters that I had absolutely no intention of visiting. I want to be very clear about what I did in my first dungeon, this legendary proving ground where warriors forge their destinies. I drank from the stream. I ate wild fruit. I built a fish trap out of a forum tutorial. I took a bath. And then I lay naked in the sun on the grass. No one could see me, don't judge. My clothes were drying, and I studied for 40 hours straight. The completion condition could wait. The dungeon rated my performance at the end, and I'll share its exact words because they hurt. Challenge failed. Strategy progress, 0%. Overall rating, useless. Useless. The system typed that. About me. This machine stole my house, and now it was leaving me 1-star reviews. But here's what useless looked like from the inside. Joe Kai had sent me 17 skill books worth of photos. I picked 9 that granted attributes and ran a production line on myself. Study a chapter, get certified, feel the system rip the upgrade costs straight out of my calories, eat half a basket of fruit, repeat. I discovered gluttony digestion, a skill for digesting faster, and leveled it first. Because if food is my mana, digestion speed is my mana regen. I turned my own stomach into infrastructure. And then, on that grass, I committed the crime the system never saw coming. I opened the photo of Fireball. Fireball was a mage class skill. Nobody in the world could use it. No one had a class yet. The books just flashed incompatible and refused. Every player on the forum had written Fireball off as future content. I learned it out of the pictures in 2 days, manually. And when I pushed my magic through the model, a wisp of warm orange flame bloomed over my fingertip, obedient as a trained bird. Light. Light under my control, not an oil lamp with a countdown, not a shelter's bulb I didn't own. Fire, from nothing, forever, mine. You have to understand what that meant in this world. Out there, in the dark, light was life expectancy. People were burning their own homes for it, and a homeless man lying naked in a dungeon had just become one of the only self-illuminating humans on the planet. When the dungeon spat me back out into the eternal night with a fresh useless stamped on my file, I stood there at the edge of the darkness that had made me crawl like an animal, that had eaten Chen Hao, that had been pressing on my skull for days like a coffin lid. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. A fireball bloomed over my palm and shoved the darkness back 10 meters in every direction, and for the first time this world got to see me, standing in my own light, no longer a crawling thing. I am a completely different person now. The following week turned into the strangest bootstrapping montage in the history of self-improvement. I never left the dungeon's little safe bubble. I just cycled, in for 48 hours of fruit, fish, and study, out for the cooldown, farming treasure chests by firelight at the entrance, in again. The regional channel kept tagging me. Someone leveled their shelter. Someone wanted to show me their new wall. Someone asked what my shelter level was, which was a targeted attack, and I replied by posting a photo of grilled fish in broad daylight. The channel had a collective aneurysm trying to figure out where the homeless man found a son. One sharp-eyed citizen noted that I didn't appear to be wearing pants. No comment was ever issued on the pants question. About those fish, actually, because the fish deserve their story told. On day 5, I strolled to the stream to check my fish trap and found it torn to splinters. Some local had destroyed my infrastructure, my property, the trap I'd woven with my own 2 academic hands. The local fish are so rude, I announced to the forest. The trap is destroyed. I no longer care to distinguish right from wrong. Magic flooded out of me into the riverbed. The stone rose with a groan, damming the stream on both ends, sealing a whole section of river with every fish in it into one big stone bathtub. Then I raised my right hand, condensed a fireball the size of a person, and fired it into the water like an artillery officer avenging a personal insult. The detonation threw water and a dozen silver fish 30 meters into the air, and before they could fall back down, I whispered, "Wind," and a gentle cyclone caught every single one of them mid-air, swirled them over, and stacked them in a neat pile at my feet. Yes, the movement skill Swift Step is technically for moving myself, but wind is wind, and I'd understood it, not memorized it, and understanding doesn't come with a user agreement. If any fish survived to tell the story downstream, the legend they spread was of a pale god who answered one broken fish trap with a tactical strike and a tornado. Correct. Let the waters remember. While I grew, the leaderboard people were having their own arc. The system had switched on rankings, level, kills, shelter, with daily rewards that made the strong stronger, and 2 names immediately started slap fighting for the top. Guo Tian, the thousandfold merchant, buying his way up with infinite resources, and a man named Li Jie. Li Jie was the Mutual Aid Society's champion, and he was everything I wasn't. A former soldier with stats near the human maximum across the board, swinging a greatsword thick as a door through monster hordes, stabbing energy potions into his own biceps so he could grind experience without sleeping for 2.5 days. His talent gave him free attribute points on demand and a damage reduction rule so absurd the forum's cheater analysis post, yes, someone wrote a full analysis titled "The Cheaters We Live Among," it got very popular, rated him the pinnacle of the modern human. And then, one day, that pinnacle of the modern human added me as a friend because the society had a problem money couldn't solve. The rankings paid out skill experience stones, pure bottled progress, and exemption stones, which could unseal one class-locked skill. Li Jie had experience to burn and an exemption stone in hand, but unsealing a skill required it to be at level 1 first, which required learning it, which, for a class-locked skill, required self-study. Self-study was my entire kingdom. So the Mutual Aid Society formally hired me as a tutor. They called me Consultant Su. My first student, the strongest man in the region. My first assignment, Teach a self-described materialist soldier to feel the fire element. I can't sense it, he messaged. I'm a materialist. This is outside my cognitive framework. You're a fake materialist, I typed back. Elements objectively exist in this world. A real materialist acknowledges objective reality and then exploits it. Step 1. Admit the fire is real. There was a long pause. Then, that makes sense. I'll try again. He got it that night. And when Li Jie poured his ranking reward experience stones into the fire skill I'd unlocked for him, the results redefined the regional food chain. A man with tank stats wreathed in flame armor, exploding through monster formations like a shell with a sword. The forum went feral. And every one of those posts had a breadcrumb trail leading back to my free guides. Oh, right, the guides. I should mention the guides because they're about to matter. Everything I learned, I published. Free. Beginner's Guide to Appraisal. Beginner's Guide to Gathering. A complete theory and practice introduction to Fireball, written like the academic paper this world didn't deserve. The miracle of non-spellcaster classes. A lighting revolution from 0 to 1. The channel's reaction split perfectly down the middle between "this man is a saint" and "I don't understand a single word. Why is there homework in my apocalypse?" Why give it away? Simple. I'm one man with no shelter. Every survivor who learns from my guides is a future customer, a future ally, a future pair of eyes finding skill books I'll want photographed. Knowledge shared isn't knowledge lost. It's infrastructure. You'll see the payoff later. Everyone did. Meanwhile, my own growth curve had gone vertical. Meditation and visualization maxed out my early mental gains, magic climbing past 10, past 13, my spirit sharpening with every level until I could hold dozens of fireballs in formation. And I do mean formation. I'd stopped throwing fireballs like snowballs and started arranging them. 64 small fireballs locked in a three-dimensional matrix based on the 64 hexagrams, orbits interlocking, energy feeding forward. When I finally test-fired the full array into the wasteland, the fireballs merged mid-flight, went from red to white like a dying star, and the explosion put a pillar of fire into the sky that made my robe snap around me from 100 meters away. I looked at my system panel. Level 0. The system genuinely believed I was the weakest possible category of survivor because I'd never killed anything. We should fix that, I thought, for science. So one quiet afternoon, I strolled to the dungeon entrance, the actual prison part, with the armed skeletons standing guard inside the gate, the ones I'd been politely ignoring for a week. Their eye sockets flickered blue at me through the door hole. "Aren't you going to invite me in for a seat?" A skeleton raised its bone blade and scraped it against its armor, which I chose to interpret as hospitality. "I won't come in, but you have to accept the gift." I floated the entire 64 fireball array through the door hole, gently, like feeding a letter into a mailbox, turned around, and walked away. A real man doesn't look back at an explosion, and it's a good thing too, because this one lifted the ground under my feet from 50 meters out and blew the front hall of the dungeon into a chimney of flame. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. 3 levels, 1 mailbox delivery. And that evening, the entire region watched a name teleport out of nowhere onto the leaderboards. Kill ranking, top 3, Lin Wei. Level ranking, top 4, Lin Wei. The channel produced a solid 30 seconds of pure question marks. The forum's conspiracy analysts concluded I must have soloed a level 4 monster, and the cheater analysis post got a new entry. Subject Lin Wei, cheat unknown, possibly losing your shelter makes you stronger. People begged for my coach services in the comments. Guo Tian, who'd spent a fortune clawing up that same leaderboard, reportedly stared at my name for a long time and asked the empty room a question that would define his entire arc. Could this guy be a cheater too? An even more secret one than me? No, Guo Tian. Worse. I did homework. And somewhere in those days, in between everything, I found the thing that would quietly become my second life. I noticed it by accident, dozing in the dungeon grass after a study binge. I'd had a dream where I sat at my old computer, and in the dream, I'd gotten bored and opened my meditation notes, and when I woke up, the skill had real experience gained. I could study in my dreams. Sleep, the last unproductive third of human life, and my talent had found a way to bill it. I started training lucid dreaming with the mental techniques I'd mastered, compressed my sleep to 3 hours a night using methods from the meditation book, and posted my findings to the forum under the title Rapid Training for Beasts of Burden, Flexible Sleep Methods, which I maintain is the most honest title I've ever written. Day 5. A system announcement rolled across the sky of everyone's mind. A monster tide was coming. Every shelter would be attacked in waves. Prepare your defenses. Rely on your shelter. The region checked its walls. Guo Tian polished his level 5 metal fortress with automatic crossbow turrets. Li Jie reinforced his stone keep. 100,000 people huddled behind whatever they'd built or bought. And one man stood in the open wasteland next to a dungeon entrance, with no shelter, no walls, and no legal address in this universe. I cracked my knuckles, reached into the earth with my magic, and started pulling up stone. If the system wouldn't give me a home, I'd grow one out of the ground. A ring wall 4 meters high, 2 thick, with a pillar in the center lifting me above the killing floor like a lighthouse keeper. It took hours and drained me white, and when it was done, I sat on top of my pillar in the middle of my little stone crown, surrounded by hovering fireballs, and waited for the end of the world. The night before the tide, the forum's most popular post wasn't a guide. It was a suicide note. A survivor, calling himself a traveler from Huai'an, wrote a letter to the tomorrow he didn't expect to see. He wrote that after 7 days of fighting to live, what he found himself thinking about wasn't survival, but the rice noodle shop downstairs that always forgot his egg, that he'd regret never having a cat, that he'd still be scared at the end because the dark was thick and the monsters were real, and that his short life hadn't been meaningless because he'd truly lived and truly fought, and if anyone reading this survived, see tomorrow's sun for him, if there is one. The replies poured in by the thousand. I want to live. Mom, I miss you. I'll do it myself before a monster does. A collective gravestone, written in real time by people typing in the dark. I sat on my pillar and read all of it, fireballs crackling softly around me. These were my channel idiots, the lamp donators, the pants inspectors. They shouldn't have been here, any of them. They should have been arguing about noodles and cats under a sun that rises on schedule. I don't have many mask-off moments. I logged that one, closed the forum, and looked out at the darkness that was about to come for all of us. Bring it on. The tide announcement hit like a gavel. And it came with a personal insult. Survivors outside a shelter got a debuff called Lone Warrior. Experience cut by 70%, monster waves massively strengthened. The system had noticed the man with no house, and specifically made his apocalypse harder. Wave 1, everyone else. 3 shambling level 0 dogs, dispatched by arrow towers amid cheerful chat commentary. Wave 1, me. 3 level 1 bloodthirsty wolf beasts, fast as cars, clawing up my wall in a pyramid formation. Fireballs, precision bursts, done. Wave 2, everyone else got a skeleton and some hounds. I got the deluxe versions, 1 tier higher, and the fight lasted 4 seconds. Wave 3 sent screaming corpse bats whose stacked shrieks could split a mind, so I skeet shot them out of the black sky and drowned the axe skeletons in ground I'd liquefied under their feet. The earth swallowed them, still swinging. Between waves, the channel mourned and celebrated. More than half the region's survivors stopped at Wave 3, that was the clear condition, and slammed the door. The bold continued for better rewards. Wave 4 wiped most of the bold. Wave 4, my version. A digging piercer the size of a car with a self-destruct skill, leading a coordinated assault team of shadow lurkers, spear throwers, a corpse tiger, and a screaming banshee, attacking from ground, air, and underground simultaneously. It was, and I say this with respect, a genuinely well-designed murder. It lasted 2 minutes. My fireballs had stopped being projectiles by then. They were a weapon system, splitting, merging, guiding themselves down cost-optimized kill curves while I stood on my pillar making tiny gestures like a conductor with strong opinions. Wave 5. 4 elites and 15 soldiers in tight formation. Skeleton mammoth like a moving hill. A plague butcher wading in poison fog. I stopped conducting and started painting. Fire tornadoes, wind and flame vortices sweeping the field. The mammoth's legs shattered under concentrated hammer fireballs, while stone pillars burst up out of the earth to cage the fast ones. The whole arena turned into an elemental blender with me at the calm center. And then the system did something that changed my life more than any level. The number of surviving challengers in the region dropped below 5, and it switched on mandatory live streams. Every remaining survivor in the region suddenly had a front row view of 3 broadcast rooms. Guo Tian, in his fortress, showboating for the cameras with his staff before hastily activating the turrets when a golem punched at his face. Li Jie leaping off his own wall into the horde because his shelter's best defense was him. And Room 3, a lone figure on a stone pillar in the open dark, no shelter anywhere in frame, surrounded by orbiting fireballs like a small solar system. The chat lost its mind. He's fighting without a shelter? Did he build that pillar himself? Wait, is this the crawling guy? Is this the fish guy? One viewer wrote Su Shen, God Su, and it stuck. and there was nothing I could do about it. Another asked if I needed a boyfriend. The apocalypse does not slow some people down even slightly. Wave 6, Lone Warrior Deluxe Edition. A level 4 elite Shadowbinder. A thing of pure darkness with a resurrection skill and a spirit stat that could bench press a warship, leading 3 level 3 elites and 10 enchanted gnolls. This one nearly had me. Its mind curse got through, thoughts turning to sludge, blood running from my nose while a soul-stealing siren sang my brain apart. I survived it by doing the least heroic thing ever broadcast. I buried myself, sank into my own stone pillar like a scared clam, let the earth close over me, and detonated every fireball I owned in a single converging nova that turned the surface into a glass parking lot, while watching my own livestream from underground for battlefield intel, because the system had kindly provided me a drone view of my own funeral. The Shadowbinder resurrected once. I waited it out, half-buried, sipping mana potions, harassing it with pop-up fireballs from below like the world's most hostile whack-a-mole, and when my magic crawled back over the line, 3 burning stone arms rose out of the crater and crushed what was left of it into a shriek and a puff of ash. Wave 7. The system stopped pretending to be fair and sent one monster, an earth-shaking boulder, level 5 elite. Strength 15, Constitution 14, a 4-meter rock demon with a crystal heart, armor that ate my best compound detonations without losing its paint, and a top speed of 150 kilometers an hour. It smashed my wall into powder, obliterated my pillar with one arm, and I did the only thing left in my toolkit. I flew. Wind under me, 300 meters up, out of its reach. It stood below, throwing rocks at me like an enraged toddler. I stood on the air, throwing my entire arsenal at it like an enraged researcher. 20 minutes and every potion I owned later, the score was, its armor, slightly toasted. My magic attribute, up 1 full point from combat stress breakthrough. It's victory, technically. Challenge failed, said the system. The boulder gave me one last silent roar and lumbered back into the dark, and I want it on record that it started it and it knows what it did. When the tide settled and the rankings paid out, the region got the full picture. Final survival rate, 20%. 80,000 people gone in a week. Of the whole region, exactly 3 had pushed past Wave 5. The merchant, the soldier, the homeless man. And then the settlement screen produced the single funniest injustice of my entire life. The temporary Guardian ranking, which scored survivors by shelter integrity during the tide, listed its number 1. Lin Wei, 100%. I had no shelter. Nothing attacked my shelter. My shelter, technically located in another universe, was untouched. The system's own logic crowned the homeless man its greatest homeowner and paid me a fortune in rewards. Then, 10 minutes later, an unknown error was detected. Fixed. The Guardian ranking is now only available to shelter holders of a specific level or higher. They patched me, personally, again. First they stole my house, then they gave me an award for it, then they changed the rules of the award so it could never happen twice. I kept the rewards, though, and a new title glowed on my panel, Single Flame, bonus to all attributes when outside a shelter's range. Even the system's poets had accepted the truth of my situation. That night, I finally used an exemption stone on my fireball, unsealing the official system version. A shiny quick cast button appeared in my mind. I pressed it. 3 standard fireballs wobbled out on a cooldown timer, weaker and dumber than anything I'd handcast since week 1. I stared at the system's fireball, then at mine, dozens of them, wheeling around me in formation like trained falcons, without any cooldown at all. What a ripoff! The system's version of my skill was the demo. I was already living in the full release. After the tide, the world grew up fast. The system rolled out a full economy in one giant patch, survival coins. A recycling box that paid cash for monster corpses, a store, an auction house, anonymous trading, even a legacy system for willing your stuff to friends, which tells you exactly how optimistic the developers were about our futures. The region reorganized around money within a day. Corpse hauling became a career. Knowledge went behind paywalls. Mine didn't. And that decision paid for itself in a way I didn't see coming, because the first thing the new economy produced was fraud. Guo Tian, freshly rich from recycling 1,000 duplicated monster fins, and freshly allied with a crew of foreign scam artists, flooded the market with manipulation schemes, and their masterpiece was impersonating me. Fake, Lin Wei paid guides. The real use of ice fruit, only 500 coins. Desperate people spent their last money on advice I'd never written, and then came to the channel to curse my name. I don't get angry often, it's inefficient, but I sat there reading a scammed teenager's message calling me a liar, and something in my chest went very cold and very quiet. quiet. Then I did the most damaging thing I could think of. I made everything free, forever, loudly. A formal statement. Every guide I have ever written or will ever write is free. Anyone charging for my name is a thief. Here's who's responsible, with the Mutual Aid Society's evidence attached. The market did the rest. It's hard to sell counterfeit knowledge when the original is free and better. The Society's economic war ground Guo Tian's syndicate down within days. They matched his dumping, stabilized prices at any cost, and bled his war chest dry. A forum historian wrote up the whole campaign like a war memoir, and in the middle of it, Zhou Kai asked my opinion on Guo Tian with the careful tone of a man consulting an artillery piece, and I gave him an answer that in hindsight explains everything my mental health tests would later say about me. Are there any methods of mind control we could use on him? There was a pause, and then Zhou Kai thanked me for the fresh perspective. The Society had been debating recruit him versus eliminate him, and I'd apparently unlocked a third category. Hold that thought, it becomes extremely relevant later. I went back into my dungeon and did the thing I'd been building toward for 2 weeks. I stopped learning other people's skills and wrote my own. Meditation, maxed. Visualization, maxed. Zen meditation, maxed. 3 complete mental disciplines, fully understood, lying in my head like disassembled engines. I took them apart and built one machine from the best parts. A still lake of consciousness with a meditation engine at the bottom drawing magic in. A nebula in the shape of a man pressing down from above, compressing and purifying everything that rose between them. A closed loop. A cultivation technique, if we're being genre honest about it, except designed from scratch by an engineering mindset instead of inherited from some 10,000-year-old sect grandpa. I named it the dual circulation method because it had 2 circulations, and I saved my creativity for the contents. Mana regeneration up 80% at idle, 360 active, passive mental growth around the clock. And when I later engraved it as a skill book, we'll get to that ability, it's ridiculous, the system certified my homemade technique as a genuine blue-grade skill with no class restriction, which made it very possibly the only high-grade attribute skill in the world that anyone could learn. I was rebuilding myself layer by layer now, and the world kept insisting on providing test material, because that's when Li Jie delivered a supply box from the Society, rare attribute treasures, equipment for mages, and 5 self-selected food vouchers from Minister Zhou, a man who understood the way to a researcher's heart and stayed to chat, and I met my first friend in this world face to face. 2 socially awkward men shaking hands next to a ruined dungeon, both privately delighted, both saying nothing warmer than, "I've long admired you." It counted. Trust me, for the 2 of us, it counted. Then he walked into the dungeon to earn his class change, and I looked down at the certificate I'd earned by mailing 64 fireballs to a boss room, and got ready to find out what the system's next trial looked like. First, though, I finally cleared that dungeon properly. Full run, deliberate, no shortcuts. Well, some shortcuts I'd upgraded since my mailbox days. The gate skeletons that once could have shredded me got flame blades through their eye sockets while I walked past without breaking stride. I read the dead wizard's lab notes on the way down, experiments on Subject 003, muscle grafts, regeneration trials, a scholar's handwriting slowly going strange. At the bottom, in a bright, clean room, 4 bone horrors guarded a pool where a faceless humanoid floated. Experiment 003, the alchemist's puppet, level 5 elite, stats above anything I'd ever fought. The fight was violent and educational. It adapted, grew fire resistance mid-battle, armored up, activated bloodlust like a seasoned duelist instead of a monster. I ground it down with 30 stacked flame walls, a cursed doll from my loot pile, and a full-power barrage that lasted 10 seconds and remodeled the room, and when it still stood up after all that, I fed it my newest invention, a compact black core fireball that didn't explode so much as delete, and Experiment 003 finally sat down as ash. You have obtained a class change certificate. And then, as I turned to leave, an old voice spoke directly into my skull. Young friend, please wait. I ran, instantly, full speed, zero shame, all the way to the entrance hall, and the voice's light mote just drifted along after me, chuckling, telling me not to panic, that by the system's rules, it couldn't harm me. It introduced itself as Alaric Stonehaven, level 20 Morningstar Wizard, ruler of a plane, traverser of worlds, hunter of gods, his words. He'd watched my fight. He liked my soul, he said. A dozen days of magic, and I'd bypass the system's crude leveling entirely through pure understanding. Such a waste, he said, for talent like mine to take some safe, orderly, boring mage class, when the truly great, the ones who make laws tremble, were wizards, seekers of the origin of things. His puppet had held his legacy. When I was strong enough, level 10 perhaps, I should come unlock it. Remember, seek the truth. The teleport light took me before he finished being dramatic. Outside, I sat down and did what I do, threat analysis. An ancient monster offers a free inheritance to a passing junior. I have read this novel. Chapter 1, Kindly Grandpa in a Cave. Chapter 40, The Grandpa is Wearing Your Body to Prom. Every sentence he'd spoken was a sales funnel. Flatter the target, disparage the alternatives, dangle the treasure. Conclusion, never, under any circumstances, touch that legacy. But the old monster had leaked one genuinely priceless fact, free of charge. Level 20, Morning Star. Level 10, another threshold. The caps at every 5 levels weren't walls, they were gates, and something on the other side of them was big enough that beings like him bothered to exist. Noted, Alaric. I'll take the intel. You keep the haunted inheritance. I raised the certificate and used it. You have entered the trial dungeon, Rise of Superpowers. Identity assigned, nobody. Main quest, survive 30 days. I opened my eyes in a forest on another world, reached for the magic in the air out of pure habit, and found nothing. Vacuum. A world with no ambient mana at all. Everything I had was what was in my body and my ring, and every spell I cast from now on burned savings that would never refill. A mage in a magicless world. The system had read my file and designed a personal nightmare. Congratulations, scholar. Your knowledge is now a non-renewable resource. 20 minutes of walking got me out of the trees and onto a mountain road where I performed the most underrated survival technique in any world. I stuck out my thumb. An old gasoline sedan pulled over. The driver, a friendly middle-aged guy, rolled the window down a crack and asked what a young man was doing alone in the wilderness. I told him my bike tire blew and my phone died, delivered with the sheepish smile of a harmless idiot, and he warmed up instantly and waved me in. 2 hours to the city, and this beautiful man narrated the entire state of his civilization for free, the way only a talkative driver can. Lucky I kept my old gas burner. The new electric cars can't use half their functions because of, that. I did not know that. That, huh? I said, nodding gravely. Ever since Jiang Yumei's livestream, that keeps happening. Satellites falling out of the sky, crackle crackle. That's why your navigation led you into the mountains, buddy. Then he leaned in, lowered his voice like we were passing state secrets, and delivered the best intelligence briefing of my career. My wife's cousin is in the army. They say, don't spread this around. Small caliber pistols can't kill people anymore. Something wrong with the gunpowder. The world's really changed when even truth loses its power. Modern world, then, slightly behind Earth's tech. Cars, phones, pop songs, and physics quietly being rewritten under everyone's feet. He dropped me at a shopping mall and even offered to rent me a power bank, and I want it noted that the kindest person I met in that entire doomed world was a taxi driver who never learned my name. Step 1 in any new world. Information. I locked myself in a mall restroom stall, sat down like a businessman, and checked my system panel. Cut off from Darklands. No channels, no trading, but my chat history was intact, which meant every skillbook photo I'd ever received was intact. A library in my pocket. I scrolled to a green-grade book I'd never had a reason to learn. Charm Spell. Don't judge me yet. Watch what I do with it. 3 hours later, I was in a corner coffee shop holding a stranger's phone. Its owner, a portly gentleman, sat beside me with slightly glazed eyes, assuring me there was absolutely no rush every time I apologized for the delay. Charm Spell. Reducing suspicion and amplifying goodwill since this afternoon. I scrolled his phone for 2 solid hours, and the story of this world assembled itself. 1 month ago, a mega idol named Jiang Yumei finished a song on a global broadcast, put down her microphone, and danced up into the night sky over the city. No wires. 2 billion viewers. The stream mysteriously could not be interrupted. Servers held 10 times their capacity without a hiccup, which no one seemed to find as suspicious as I did. The official denial was issued by a temp worker and retracted within a day, and the world went insane on schedule. Worship, panic, churches offering her the papacy, and everywhere, lucky ones waking up with powers. Fire breathers, metal shapers. They called themselves the Awakened. Since then, someone had been switching off human civilization 1 circuit at a time. Satellites dead, precision instruments dead, the military parade canceled because the tanks wouldn't start. A gun rights activist assassinated by a pistol that couldn't shoot straight anymore. And the punchline, through all of it, phones and communications worked perfectly. Better than perfectly. The one technology that survived the apocalypse was the one you'd need to broadcast a hero to a captive audience. Technology suppressed, physics rewritten, comms mysteriously immune. I tapped the borrowed phone against my chin. Classic novel setup. The question is just whether the world is doing this, or someone's doing it to the world. Then I found him. The man the whole timeline bent around. Huo Ming. 1 month ago, an ordinary clerk from a border town. Today, director of the brand new Ability Administration, commander of the strongest awakened alive, savior of cities. His dossier read like a checklist. Meteoric rise, check. Predicted every single beast tide with perfect accuracy and arrived just in time to save each city on a live broadcast, check. And the women. The files documented his romantic orbit with the thoroughness of a lonely archivist, a sexy policewoman, a haughty heiress, a naive martial arts prodigy, a noble princess. I pulled up the national beauty rankings. This world maintained official beauty rankings, do not ask me why, and cross-referenced. Of the top 10 most beautiful women in the nation, nearly every one had already appeared at Huo Ming's side or inside his sphere of influence. I set the phone down and felt the deep, weary recognition of a man who has read 10,000 chapters of exactly this. This Huo Ming, why does he look exactly like a protagonist? Because he was one, artificially. Somewhere behind that man was a system, staging this entire apocalypse as his personal hero movie, suppressing the weapons that could threaten him, spawning the disasters he'd get credit for solving, and apparently running a harem acquisition subplot with the top 10 list as a shopping catalog. Which meant the smart play was the one I'm best at. Stay out of the plot. Let the protagonist have his movie. I'm not a character. I'm a guy in the background of the disaster footage, walking briskly the other way. But first I had a real problem to solve, because my situation was quietly desperate. This world had no ambient magic. None. A perfect vacuum. Every spell I cast burned reserves that would never refill, and my entire power system was a car with no gas stations. A mage in a magicless world. The system had read my file and designed a personalized nightmare. Congratulations, scholar. Your knowledge is now a non-renewable resource. So I found an abandoned 2-story villa on the edge of a small town, blacked out the windows, and went to war with thermodynamics. What is magic? Primordial energy. What are elements? Magic transformed by the world's underlying rules. And here was the paradox that gave me hope. If magic only ever converted one way, into elements and then into heat and light, every magical world would have run dry eons ago. Magic had to regenerate somehow. The cycle had to close. I just had to find the return valve. 2 days of experiments in that villa, controlled environments, sealed fields, feeding elements into isolation chambers, and measuring everything with my own mental sense because this world's instruments were dead, and I found it. Elements were infectious. A high concentration slowly assimilated surrounding energy into itself. And under the right balanced conditions, the reaction ran backwards. Elements could decay into raw magic. Magic to element. Element back to magic. Heat and electricity in, mana out. I built the first magic conversion device in this world's history, out of scavenged parts, stolen electricity, and constant spell engraving. And when the little machine hummed and the mana concentration in the room began to rise, barely, wastefully, gloriously, I sat down on the dusty floor and allowed myself 1 entire minute of smugness. The system's nightmare scenario, patched in 5 days with a soldering iron. Power source secured. Time for Phase 2, the thing protagonists never do. I called the government first. I looked up the local prefect, a career administrator named Chen Ji-ming, flew across the city above the clouds with my face covered, and drifted in through his open office window like a leaf. His 2 bodyguards, B-rank awakened, lunged. My cloak's mischief effect put them both to sleep mid-lunge, and they folded to the carpet like laundry. I pulled up a chair across from a man doing an admirable job of not visibly panicking. It's nothing, they're just napping. Hello, Prefect Chen. I am a mage who specializes in fire magic. My name is Wei Lin. I'd reversed my own name, which felt like tradecraft at the time. The system's translation had opinions. Chen Ji-ming blinked and said, very carefully, "A bunch of Mr. Pancakes?" We worked through it, and then I opened my palm and gave him the demo. A flame blooming to life, collapsing into a cool breeze, condensing into water droplets, falling as a pinch of dust. 4 elements, 1 hand, 10 seconds. His eyes went wide, and I could watch him recalibrating my threat rating in real time. S rank? Higher? I am not one of your awakened, I said. I'm a mage from beyond this world, and I use a completely different system. I'm here to make official contact with your government. This is a meeting that could change the times. Then, because no negotiation should rely on goodwill alone, I dropped the bait no dying regime could refuse. Tell your superiors that unlike your powers, which awaken randomly and can't be replicated, my magic can be learned, and a learner has a real chance at longevity. Was that true? No idea. Neither did they. That's what made it perfect. Chen Ziming had me on an encrypted line with his emperor by the next morning. This world ran a constitutional monarchy with actual dynastic hardware, a middle-aged man in a dragon robe with the tired eyes of someone whose job description had recently become preside over extinction. I traded them the foundations of the magic system: meditation, visualization, the basic spell books, the theory. In exchange, I asked for one thing, and I remember the exact silence after I said it. Package up your civilization's technology. Everything from the first industrial revolution to the eve of the collapse. All major fields. All? Is there a problem? There was not a problem. Somewhere in a dying empire, archivists began copying the accumulated knowledge of their entire species onto drives for a stranger in a robe. And I'd like to say I felt guilty about the exchange rate, but their tech was about to be worthless to them and priceless to me, and one of us was going to survive the month. They gave me a state-of-the-art underground laboratory in Hudu, their southern fortress city, and I moved in and started dissecting the apocalypse. Superhumans first. I started with corpses. A D-rank muscle hardener went on my table, and I opened him up. Denser tissue. A new kind of fiber. Ordinary organs. No engine. A C-rank fire breather next. He had a gland in his chest like a factory-installed flamethrower, storing fuel his body brewed. Still no source. Just plumbing. The reports agreed. Low-rank powers grew visible organs. High-rank fire controllers grew nothing at all. An S-rank could summon flame with a hooked finger, and the researchers had never found where the fire came from. The mechanism arose out of thin air. That was the whole mystery in one line. So I stopped cutting bodies and started reading minds. A young research assistant volunteered. C-rank, digestion enhancement. A fellow scholar of the stomach arts. I laid my hand on his forehead and sent a thread of pure mental sense into him, gentle as a nurse. His stomach was swollen with proliferating tissue. His digestive juices carried strange chemistry, but no special organ, no special energy, nothing. Deeper then, into the soul. An ordinary person's soul sea isn't formed yet. It's a fog. I swept through it, careful, looking for anything. It's a little itchy, the assistant reported, and there's a indescribable feeling. Quiet, I said. I kept searching. 10 minutes, nothing. Then I noticed the assistant had gone very still. I looked down. His eyes were glazed. His breathing had changed. He looked up at me like a man in a soft dream. Bro, he said, you smell so good. I, withdrawing my mental force with the speed of a man touching a stove, terminated the session. Fired nobody, tipped him well, and sent for a subject I could be less polite with. They brought me a death row prisoner. C-rank, iron arm, a man who'd massacred a village, now wearing a restraint collar and a sneer. This one I didn't ask permission from. I drove straight through the front door of his soul, past the surface noise, past the emotions, down to the core. He screamed the whole way, an inhuman sound, and I knocked him out, and the pain woke him again, and I had my assistant sedate him 3 times before he stopped fighting long enough for me to look. And there it was. Floating beside the origin of his soul, a ball of light. Not matter, not energy. Something embedded, pulsing faintly, fused into him and yet foreign, a plug-in forcibly installed in a running program. I checked my own soul, nothing. I checked ordinary people, nothing. Only the empowered carried one, the psionic light orb, the engine of every superhuman in the world. I watched it work. When the prisoner used his power, the orb brightened and spat energy into his arm. And when I found a fresh awakening later, a researcher convulsing on a bed, powers coming in, I watched the orb do the real job. It burrowed toward the soul's core and remodeled him on the way down. Muscle, bone, nerves, gene expression, the soul itself. All of it rewritten to fit the power, the host reshaped into a vessel for a thing that had moved in. I named the fusion chimerization and the rebuild infection. And in my notes I wrote, in what I thought at the time was clean professional shorthand, efficient, mandatory, strong path dependency, a valuable template if I ever need to mass-produce cannon fodder. I'd like to tell you I noticed how cold that sentence was. I did not. Remember it anyway. One more experiment, and this one had teeth. I got greedy. I reached out with the thinnest thread of mental power I could spin and touched an orb directly, a fingertip on a soap bubble. The thread ceased to exist. Not severed, not damaged, erased. No process, no resistance, gone like ice under the sun, and I was 100 meters down the corridor before the pain even reached my brain. Whatever lived in those orbs, the little SS rank power was the tip of it. The real thing was a locked box with a guillotine for a keyhole. Tuition paid, lesson learned. I stopped touching the merchandise. The beasts were almost relaxing by comparison. Every mutated animal ran on a malicious energy I named aberrant energy, a hungry, hateful thing that devoured the host's food energy and paid it back as strength, sealed under artificial restrictions that dictated what it was allowed to eat. It refused every energy but the ones its leash permitted, which was itself a clue. Something had put a collar on it, deliberately, and I wanted very badly to know who owned the leash. I got samples into containment and started the long, careful business of learning to feed it, which would pay off later in a mountain cave in a way I did not see coming. And then there were the satellite photos. Chen Jiming played them for me in his office, off one of the last drives from their dying orbital network. This is what happened, he said quietly, to the continents where humanity had already been wiped out. Oceania, a carpet of flesh from horizon to horizon, inlaid with ship skeletons and things that used to be limbs. The far continent's west coast, a tree of meat and bone whose trunk broke the stratosphere, whose canopy was a net of tentacles woven across the sky, whose roots had replaced the mountain ranges. Wherever the last human fell, the restrictions came off the aberrant energy, and it stopped eating biology and started eating the planet. Wo Ming claims to be the strongest human alive, Chen Jiming said. We ran the numbers. Any one of these things would kill him like an insect. That was the bottom of this world's cereal box. Not the beast tides, not the collapse. Continental gods waiting politely for the last man to die. And that was also the moment Chen Jiming made his pitch. He laid out the case against Wo Ming like a prosecutor. The impossible rise, the perfect predictions, the selective technology collapse whose sole beneficiary commanded the only remaining armed force, the protagonist's halo you could see from orbit. We don't believe in this savior, he said. We think he's the author of all of it, so we're going to be the villains of his story. And then this tired bureaucrat of a doomed empire bowed to me. If you want to see the true face of this world, lend us a hand at the crucial moment. I neither agreed nor refused, which is my favorite kind of answer. But privately, my sympathy was with the villains. Their world had been turned into a stage set, their species into extras, and the audacity of their counterattack was growing on me. They had no weapons left. Their tanks were surf. So the last government of a murdered civilization was preparing to fight a superpowered demigod with the only arsenal that still worked: spite. I want to pause here and tell you about the emperor, because his scenes deserve preservation. While his empire died, the man had crossed all the way through despair and come out the other side into a kind of festive madness. Palace banquets while the reports came in. When a messenger burst in to announce the beast tide would reach Hudu by tomorrow, the emperor cried, "Excellent! You've come at the perfect time, a generous reward," and the court roared. When word came that sea monsters had made landfall, that even the oceans were sending armies, he rewarded that messenger too. And at a private dinner with Chen Jiming, between courses, sat a fresh head on a side table, the third prince's. His own son had tried something, and the emperor had handled it personally and then sat down to eat, and the two of them planned strategy over the meal like the head was a centerpiece. If we're all dying anyway, the philosophy went, let us at least be unforgettable about it. I'd call them monsters, but their execution was about to be flawless, so let's call them motivated. Which brings us to their princess, and to the closest I came in that whole world to losing myself. An Liling, eldest princess of the dynasty, top of that national beauty ranking 10 years running, 7 doctorates, and the highest official left in Hudu. She first appeared in my laboratory unannounced, and I, deep in a dissection, allergic to interruptions, fired the assistant who'd let her in and told the most beautiful woman in the nation, without looking up, "You, out." She left without a word. I found out afterward who she was when my remaining assistants explained, in the hushed tones of men describing a lightning strike, that I had just evicted Her Highness. The second time she found me, she'd learned my magic. Understand, I'd handed their researchers the meditation foundations days earlier, and their best minds, leaders of entire fields, couldn't yet sense mana. An Li Ling stood in a testing yard and threw a wobbly fireball, then an ice arrow, off theory alone, having touched actual magic for less than a day. Learning speed like that isn't talent. Talent doesn't move that fast. That's the answer key writing itself into someone's hand. How, I asked her, did it feel? She considered. Like the knowledge was already there, and I was just picking it up again. And there's a sense of, she searched for the word, friendliness, between me and the world. The energy doesn't reject me. The world doesn't reject her. I ran the hypothesis I didn't want to run. I hit her, without warning, with a spell built to terrify and touch nothing, pure menace, zero harm, and watched what happened. What happened was that the entire world turned and looked at me, malice from every direction at once. Not an attack, a verdict, seeping in through the rules themselves, my thoughts thickening, my magic dragging, the air itself developing an opinion about my continued existence. I'd found it. World's will. The planet had a survival instinct, the superpower system, and the aberrant tide were the infection, and this woman was the immune response, a daughter of destiny, hand-raised by a desperate world, with the magic system I'd imported apparently adopted as the antibody of choice. I explained all of it to her straight, the invader, the infection, her role, and felt the world's malice around me ease slightly with every sentence, like an examiner grudgingly awarding partial credit. And then, since I'd offended her with the test, I offered her one reasonable request as an apology. Take me as your teacher, she said. No. Then help me kill Huo Ming. No. Then help us hold Hu Du against the beast tide. Protecting the city is protecting. Okay, I said. I want you to appreciate the horror of that moment. The word was out of my mouth before my brain voted. I don't agree to things. I especially don't agree to frontline positions in someone else's climactic battle. Something had reached into the space between my judgment and my tongue and pressed yes. And as I stood there rerunning the last 10 seconds, my eyes refocused on An Li Ling, and a thought bloomed in my head, fully formed, in my own inner voice. She's so beautiful. I want to be her dog. I have never left a building faster in 2 worlds. Magic burst, straight up, through the roof, gone, leaving the princess standing in the yard, bewildered, while somewhere above the clouds a mage ran the most important diagnostics of his life. That thought had not been mine. The world's will, tired of asking, had started editing. And if my dual circulation method hadn't been purpose-built to suppress and flag anomalous mental activity, the region's future number 2 would have spent the apocalypse as a very powerful golden retriever. I did 2 things that day. First, I dumped every spell I knew onto a USB drive and had it delivered to the princess, partly a parting gift, mostly a ransom payment, and it worked. The moment she had the knowledge, the world's malice unhooked from me like a bailiff who'd been paid. Second, I built the protocol I still run to this day, a bank of memorized psychological tests, randomized, self-administered every few hours, calibrated to my own baseline. Because in a multiverse where worlds, systems, and orbs all want to edit your head, the deadliest attack is the one you agree with. My first self-test scored 79 out of 100. Turns out my baseline included overly pragmatic, controlling, skewed vigilance, slightly cold-blooded. I rewrote the scoring criteria until I scored 95, which is either self-acceptance or the exact problem the test was for. We move on. I relocated to the deep mountains and hollowed a laboratory into a cliff, and this part I genuinely enjoyed. No power grid out there, so I made the local wildlife my power plant. I built stone beacons and baited them with wisps of pure magic, because aberrant energy craves mana more than it craves flesh. I strung them along a pretty little path down to a natural depression I'd converted into a giant incineration array. Outer beacon lights up, monster comes running. Inner beacons pull it down the path, then the pit floor detonates. Beast in, flash fire, fire element out, piped uphill, reversed back to mana. A self-serve, monster-burning power station. The apocalypse kept mailing me fuel with legs on it, and I kept lighting it on fire. And with the lights on, I finally cornered the thing I'd been afraid to touch. Aberrant energy itself. I fed it magic and watched it feast. I hit it with every element I could make. Most of what came out was garbage, unstable half-states, energy flickering between forms, gone in an instant. But one time, something sat still at the edge of the chamber, a jet-black element, perfectly calm while everything around it thrashed. And it wasn't in any book I'd ever read. I coaxed it out, set it on a live mutant beast, and watched it start rewriting the animal at the cellular level, exactly like aberrant energy does, until it brushed up against the beast's own core of aberrant energy, and the black element went instantly, totally still, like a bully freezing at his father's footstep. A new element, born from magic and aberrant energy, fused under the world's strangest rules, wearing both their traits and terrified of its own parent. I named it the aberration element, spent 20 more hours failing to understand it, pulled out another fistful of hair, and filed it under someday carefully. Meanwhile, the main plot rolled on without me, which is exactly where I like a main plot to be. And since I later got the full story from every side of it, let me tell you what happened in Hoodoo, because it deserves telling. The beast tide came for the city, millions strong, a black horizon of teeth, with the sky darkening dust and the ground shaking tread of a disaster that had stopped pretending to be natural. Huo Ming, who controlled every beast wave through his system, had aimed this one personally. His plan, reconstructed from testimony: let the most beautiful woman in the world defend her city alone, let her despair, and then descend from heaven at the perfect cinematic moment to save her. His words, per witnesses, in a grand, desperate rescue extravaganza. He'd done it before. It was his signature move. An entire harem assembled via staged catastrophe. On the wall of Hoodoo, An Ling gave him his show. She stood alone above the garrison, one woman, one sword, wind element coiling around her like a personal atmosphere, and cut S-rank flying horrors out of the sky in single strokes, while the soldiers below screamed themselves hoarse. The world itself fed her, 3 magic conversion devices running full tilt underground, mana rivering up to the wall, the world's will bending every rule in her favor. And when the numbers finally told, she let herself sway, let her face go pale, let the defense crack, and the tide poured into her city, and she stood on the broken wall like a martyr accepting fate, one bird strike from death. On cue, lightning from the horizon. "You beast! How dare you harm people!" Huo Ming descended in a nova of thunder, vaporized the monster mid-lunge, cleared a boulevard through the horde with one hand for the cameras, then turned to his prize with his hand extended and his profile angled for the livestream. The livestream cut out worldwide at that exact moment. What the audience didn't see, the princess didn't take his hand. She looked at him with total calm, while the vulnerability drained off her face like makeup in the rain. And then she moved, a full power thrust, wind and something older behind it, the world's will compressing every blessing it owned into one point of steel, and put her sword through the savior's chest, through his lightning shield, through his armor. He was hurled 100 meters, gaping down at his own blood, and she straightened up, sheathed her blade, and delivered the single greatest one-liner in the history of that dying world. You relied on a system from outside the world. You orchestrated this catastrophe, treated billions of lives as pawns, and built your savior vanity on a mountain of corpses. A pause. Clown. And Huo Ming, I need you to understand what kind of man we're dealing with. Huo Ming heard the woman of his dreams inventory his crimes with murder in her eyes, and his takeaway, sworn testimony, was, "She's even more beautiful when she hates me, and also, she must have deduced my secret through sheer brilliant intellect. We are clearly soulmates locked in a battle of wits." He froze the entire beast tide with a snap to show off. He offered her his one and only X-rank power core, a treasure beyond SSS, plus a 7-day grace period to grow strong enough to fight him, on the theory that this was flirting. She took the core, told him not to follow her, and flew off to the capital to kill her own government before he could use them as hostages, only to find the capital already done. I'll give you the result, not the details. The Emperor's apocalypse party had reached its natural conclusion, and the city was a monument now, in the medium of everything a city contains. She stayed outside the walls. 7 days. That was the clock. And this is where the villains fired their masterpiece, and where my name got dragged into history's stupidest war. The court's psychological warfare division had studied Huo Ming and found his real weak point. Not his body, unkillable, not his system, unreachable, his self-image. This was a man who'd built his whole soul on being the protagonist, the chosen one, the savior, the sole owner of everything worth owning. So they didn't attack him, they attacked the ownership. Phase 1, a woman named Liu Xuan. S-rank, princess of the Water Clan, a member of his inner circle, and secretly flipped by the court once they showed her what he actually was. She walked into his office and asked him, sweetly, one question. Out of the top 100 beauties of this dynasty, how many have you recruited? He preened. All of them, near enough. He was a connoisseur. And are they all, she asked, pure and innocent? Of course, he said. He was picky. She let the silence do some work. Then, use your own brain. The most beautiful women of an empire, raised at the center of power and wealth and fame their whole lives, and every single one waited untouched for you? You, a flawless exemplar among millions of coincidences? Then she showed him photographs. Forged, most of them, painted by the court's best artists over certain genuine materials, starring a robed figure whose face never quite resolved. The mage, she explained gently. The otherworldly mage owns the beauty rankings. Always has. You were never the protagonist of this story. You were the late arrival to a table that was already set. Huo Ming asked his system whether the photos were fake. The system, remember this detail, said no. Phase 2. The men in green hats. In this world, as in mine, a green hat on a man means exactly one thing. His woman belongs to someone else. So the court hired 1,000 men. They assembled them in the plaza outside the Ability Administration headquarters, in broad daylight, under a director with a megaphone. And on the shouted signal, "To our great savior, with the utmost respect," 1,000 men whipped off 1,000 green hats and flung them into the sky at him like graduation caps. A stadium's worth of cuckoldry, synchronized, choreographed, with a conductor keeping time. The strongest being on the planet stood in a blizzard of green hats, and something inside him made the sound of a snapping cable. Was any of it true? Not one frame. Did it work? Completely. He killed his own inner circle in the blast of his rage. The court had counted on exactly that, flipping who they could and sacrificing the rest, a scorched soul operation from the first day. And then he tore into the sky, radar locked by his own lying system onto the single person the story had cast as his rival. The mage. Me. A man in a mountain cave, dissecting a lizard, with no idea any of this had happened. My first warning was the sky turning white with lightning, and a voice like a collapsing bridge screaming, "You're that mage?" And then, the strongest superhuman in the world was trying to kill me over a harem I had never met, crimes that had never occurred, in a war invented by a dead government's gossip division. I checked his stats as I fled. Level 6 equivalent. Strength, spirit, constitution, all above 15. Mine were 12 on a good day. Head on, he'd fold me in half. So I didn't fight him head on. I fought him the way an entrenched researcher fights, with real estate. He chased me through a floating minefield of jet-black fireballs and learned that one of them was real. The Annihilation Core detonation took his corneas and most of his confidence. He recovered, blind-fired his way to my lab, found a wall of black spheres guarding the entrance, nerved himself up, and discovered these ones were all fakes, popping like party balloons, at which point rage overrode caution, which was the design. He smashed into my laboratory, and the floor stopped being a floor, quicksand arrays seizing him while his lightning grounded harmlessly into all that lovely earth. He charged his ultimate breakout blast. I released every restraint at once and let his own thrust fire him through a paper-thin wall I'd pre-hollowed, straight out of the mountainside and down, into the incinerator pit where I melt monsters into fuel, which had been idling under him this whole time like a patient's stomach. Then, while the white-hot field held him down, I did the math on his armor. Lightning armor, modeled on ancient full-body plate, and ancient plate always compromises in the same place, because armorers across all worlds had to let men walk. Heaviest at the chest, lightest below the belt. I condensed a fire lance to a needle and put it through the gap. The explosion took the lower half of his torso. All of it. Everything. The strongest man in that world lost the battle, the war, and the entire thematic content of his character arc in one shot, and when his healing tried to triage him, his own inheritance core assessed the missing region as not a necessary component for survival, and deprioritized it. The scream he screamed when he found out was heard by no one, because I was already gone. I ripped my whole laboratory out of the cliff face and flew it away as an aerial fortress, and when he sent endless vengeful beast tides after me, I ringed the flying lab with harvesting flame and let his armies pour into my engine intake. He besieged me with an ocean of monsters. I refueled on the siege, climbed to the stratosphere, and got back to work. You may be wondering about my rating at this point. Hold that thought. The endgame belonged to the locals, and they'd earned it. The world's will pulled a swap. The true will of the planet possessed An Li Ling's body to fight, while the princess herself was seconded upstairs to hold the rules steady, and it came to me, of all people, to commission a weapon. It wanted a custom body, a flesh construct balancing aberrant energy, aberration element, and magic, something possible only with my conversion models. In exchange, it offered the complete dissection data of every continental god on the planet, plus safe passage to deep space. I took the deal and delivered the goods with one modification it didn't ask about. Every stabilizing spell in that body ran on my constants. The product worked perfectly until I left the neighborhood, at which point it would have a shelf life. Selling you a weapon doesn't mean selling you the trigger. The trap they built with it was beautiful, and I want to walk you through it because it's the finest piece of stagecraft I witnessed in that entire theatrical world. Huo Ming came back regenerated and rabid. His system had helpfully told him I was heading for the capital, near his princess, which detonated his jealousy into a supernova. He arrived to find An Li Ling waiting on the ruined wall, and beside her, a masked figure in a mage's robe. Me, supposedly. He attacked. The mage raised one pale hand, and the beast tide around the capital, his beast tide, his loyal army, came alive against its master. He snapped his fingers to reclaim them, and they hesitated, and then kept charging at him, and I want you to picture the exact moment a man realizes his own dog has read his contract. Interesting, he said, laughing, and cleared a vacuum in the horde with a pillar of lightning 10 meters wide. No matter how much trash comes, it can't touch me. Then the earth of the capital split. A hand came up out of the ground, 6 fingers, nails like ridgelines, an arm hundreds of meters long, grown from the flesh construct I'd sold the world's will, wearing my constant spells like a hidden signature. It reached past all his lightning and closed around him, and the strongest man on the planet folded like laundry in a fist he could not budge. No, he screamed the one order that could save him. System, reclaim all aberrant energy, now! And the world went silent, like a bass note removed. The Titan's hand collapsed into dead meat and rained from the sky. The beast tide's eyes went dark all at once, and hundreds of millions of monsters dropped where they stood, puppets with the strings cut, because he'd just recalled the poison from his own army to save his own life. He'd disarmed the apocalypse. He'd saved the world to keep his skin. He hit the corpse field he'd made of that world, broken, healing, and stood up to gloat. I brought destruction, and I withdrew it. I am the destroyer and the savior. Beg me. And the dead flesh across the ground stirred and flowed, and the masked mage on the wall dissolved into light and poured into it. A behemoth rose, hundreds of meters of severed limbs and rotating eyes, all of them fixed on the ant below. And then he heard the last voice he expected, his own system, cool as a dial tone. 2 words. Farewell. It had a stronger host lined up. It had, the evidence suggests, been shopping for a while. The photos it swore were real, the locations it leaked, every lie that steered him to this exact wall. He never saw the kill shot. He died silently on his own stage, in his own finale, deleted by his own production company. And if there's one line from that whole world I've underlined twice in my notes, it's this. A system is an instrument that plays you back. Epilogue, briefly, because the universe insisted on one. The 9 escaped horrors of that world, the freed remnants of its apocalypse, stuffed what was left of Huo Ming's soul into a small ball of flesh and set course for another star system. A 3,000-year voyage, with him aboard as the in-flight entertainment. And the world's will, having burned its bridges back to its own body, caught up to my laboratory at the edge of space in the form of a little flesh doll knocking on my hull, and made me an offer. It could be my supercomputer, my analysis engine, my vassal. Brother, said the will of an entire world, tapping on my viewport as I throttled up. Brother, please pay attention to me. I aimed my engines the other way. Dirty things stay dirty. It was still transmitting testimonials when the trial's timer ran out. Me? I was in orbit by then. I'd converted my flying laboratory into a matchbox-shaped spacecraft. Solar panels, oxygen tanks, radiation shielding, all scavenged and spell-welded, and spent the final days of the trial floating above a dying world, saving its technology archive screenshot by screenshot, watching the flesh tree crumble in the distance when the aberrant restrictions snapped back. World's will caught up to me at the end, in the form of a small flesh doll banging on my hull. It had lost its bid to return to its own body. It offered to become my vassal, my supercomputer, my little helper. Brother, it said. Brother, please pay attention to me. I aimed my engine the other way. Dirty things stay dirty. And the trial ended. The evaluation screen was, I'll admit, a moment. Trial Dungeon, Rise of Superpowers, challenge successfully completed. Overall rating, excellent. Comment, the Savior weeps for you, the Chosen One willingly becomes your vessel, and the world will beg to be your dog. Even the system's report card had gossip energy. And then it offered me 3 classes, and this choice tells you everything about who I'd become in 1 month. God of Magic, Mastery of all spells, plus 500% skill gains, the power fantasy in a can. Truth Wizard, Analysis, Skill Weaving, the Path of Omniscience, and a name 1 letter away from a certain Morningstar salesman's business card. Absolutely not. Scholar, 50% faster learning and research, a skill that burns lifespan for bursts of inspiration. And a third ability called Skill Book Writing. Condense anything you truly understand into a real, system-certified skill book. I didn't even hesitate. Gods are a job title. Wizards are a cult. But a scholar with a printing press, that's a civilization. I chose Scholar, took my new titles, including one called Observer that makes me harder to find with prophecy, thank you. I will be needing that constantly. And my talent evolved a third effect. Research speed significantly increased. The teleport light gathered me up and carried me home to the dark. And the first thing I did back in Darklands, before food, before rest, was test skill book writing on my own dual circulation method. Understand what happened next, because it's the engine of everything after. I engraved my technique into a book. The system certified it as a real skill, which meant the system would now level it, and every level of a technique I designed pays out in attributes. I don't need to cultivate for years. I write the textbook, the system does the training montage, I get the results and the bill for energy. I drained every potion I had and walked out of my stone hut with my spirit attribute up 2 full points, glowing faintly, while the society team camped outside took an involuntary step backward. The strongest muscle in this world, it turns out, is peer review. The region I'd come home to was transforming. Class change was the new gold rush, teams of 5 grinding dungeons for certificates, then facing their own trial worlds. And the trials were maiming people. Of the society's 15 elites who went in, 9 came back, and several of those weren't right anymore. Every trial we pieced together was the same shape. A doomed world, 30 days, survive, and almost nobody saved their world, and watching a civilization die does something to a person that healing potions don't touch. Li Jie came back from his own trial hollow-eyed, having personally executed his corrupted comrades and still lost everything. And it took Mei Hua, our healer, doctorate in child psychology, patron saint of overqualified, 3 hours of counseling to hand him back his spine. Her method deserves preservation. Everyone failed their world, she told him. Failing is the norm. Statistically, you're fine. Sometimes the most healing sentence in the universe is, it's not just you. Meanwhile, I did what I do. Li Jie and I took my new gunship laboratory into the hazardous terrain, the system's newest gift, spreading zones of madness where the magic runs violent, the monsters run level 6, and the very air erodes your mind. We found blue-grade skill books there, and diamond chests, and a ruined mage tower from some previous era of this world, and inside that tower, a survivor's shelter, and inside that shelter, what was left of a man the erosion had gotten to. I'll give you the result, not the process. He had stopped being able to tell what food was, and he had been alone. We stood there a while. Then we posted a warning to the entire region, and I wrote a self-test system for mental erosion and published it free. And if you're noticing that half my inventions are about protecting minds, mine and everyone's, you're noticing the right thing. In this world, the monster that actually kills you is usually the one wearing your face. Li Jie, for the record, handled the terrain worse than me. His delusions got florid. At one point he confided, dead serious, that someone had planted a listening device in his rectum, and I had to administer a sanity quiz to the strongest man in the region while he sulked. We found a perfect-grade anchoring pocket watch in a chest, a device that displays your real-time sanity as a percentage. Mine read 94 and stable. His read 75 to 83, fluctuating. He asked if that meant he was crazy. I told him it meant his measurement error was too large, which is the kind of sentence that's true, kind, and completely useless, my specialty. And one more person joined the story here. Don't let his introduction fool you. He matters. During the terrain runs, we'd been dumping monster corpses at some random survivor's shelter with a note offering 5% for disposal. The survivor did the work. Then he sent back an itemized ledger, timestamped screenshots, and a statistical table, and took exactly 5% to the coin, not a fraction over. In an economy full of thieves, that kind of honesty glows like a signal flare in the dark. His name was Dung Bo, and he'd hit the survival game as a nobody and clawed into the region's top 50 through one skill, grinding himself half to death without complaint. When I finally lifted him up into my laboratory, he came clutching a small porcelain bottle to his crotch like his firstborn. I probed it. My mental sense hit a wall so smooth I couldn't even read the material, unbreakable to my perception. That doesn't happen, he explained. It was a treasure he'd gambled out of a wishing well, upgraded through great effort, a pocket dimension inside a bottle where you could grow and breed attribute plants. Feed it a mother plant, wait, and it bore daughters with the same power. A farming cheat. A real one, the kind frustrations build empires on, and he handed me the secret voluntarily. His reasoning was pure survival math, delivered without a shred of shame. Clinging to the strongest backer beats being robbed by a random one. Then he summarized his entire life philosophy in a single, disarming sentence. My dream since childhood has been to live off someone else. I hired him on the spot. Never underestimate an honest man who knows exactly what he is. Later, he'd become my logistics hub, my talent research assistant, and the author of a real estate investment thesis written in formal classical Chinese, but that's a story for the back half. Li Jie, meanwhile, got a promotion the hard way. While he'd been off exploring with me, the softer parts of the Mutual Aid Society had started to rot. Factions, favor trading, the old peacetime instincts creeping back into an apocalypse. The kind of thing that always metastasizes the moment the strongest man leaves the room. So the strongest man came back to the room. He walked into a council meeting where every executive and manager sat in one place, and he did the pruning personally, blade in hand, dark energy running down the horse-slaying saber. One corrupt councilman went down under the saber, then rose again, cradling his own head in his hands, a life-saving talent, the kind that buys you exactly one more sentence. He spent it on a smooth little sermon about tolerance, about how any organization needs a little sand in it. Li Jie swung a second time, and there was no talent left to catch it. When it was done, number one nodded, and Li Jie was president. In this world, absolute power in the hands of someone who actually believes in the rules is the only broom that sweeps clean. He believed. He swept. The days between crises I spent building, and the biggest build site was inside my own head. I'd proven dream study worked. Now I industrialized it. The plan, construct a permanent, stable dream world running on my terms with controlled time flow. The reality, dreams, it turns out, have an immune system. The first time I tried to reformat my own dreamscape, the dream ejected me, just spat my consciousness out into a formless void between sleep and waking, no up, no down, no exit, my body left behind as an unattended vegetable. Getting lost like that, the old text said, was how sleepers became permanent sleepers. That's why real dreamwalkers anchored themselves to something called the dream plane, a great meeting place of consciousness, which, I checked thoroughly, does not exist in Darklands. No anchor for me. So I improvised. If I couldn't find my way back to my dream, I'd make my dream come to me. I planted my awareness like a flag and summoned, and the entire dreamscape slid across the void and swallowed me back up, obedient as a called dog. I do not go to the mountain. The mountain has my number. It ejected me hundreds more times over the following days because every structural modification offended it. I got kicked out for building, kicked out for accelerating time, kicked out on one memorable occasion so abruptly that when I clawed my way back in, my unsupervised subconscious had thrown a party in my absence. The dreamscape overrun with escaped memory fragments and mental junk, all the internet garbage of a former information age brain given form and voice. A chubby figure from some forgotten meme waddled up to me through the chaos, looked me dead in the eye, and declared, "Lin Wei, you're just a loser." I deleted him with a wave and no expression, and built a warden so it would never happen again. A pure logic auxiliary consciousness, distilled from my own subconscious, emotionless, obedient, tasked with maintaining the dream while I'm away. I named him Shaolin. He runs my infrastructure, files my reports, and occasionally observes, in my own flat voice, that what I'm doing to him is exploitation. Which is impossible. You can't exploit yourself. That's called a work ethic. The finished dream world is, and I say this with appropriate modesty, the best thing I've ever built. A private starry sky where every star is a book I've stored and every lit star is one I've mastered. A whole galaxy of ignorance, waiting to be switched on one light at a time. A library at the center. Time running at multiples of reality, so an hour of sleep pays out several hours of study. Later, I partitioned it, study zone, experiment zone, a calculation palace where Chow Lin herds a workforce of single-purpose thought threads through parallel problems like a foreman. I sleep, and my sleep does research, and if that sounds like I never truly rest anymore, correct, and I've never rested better. The body got its overhaul too, because my panel had started sending warnings. My spirit stat had run so far ahead of my constitution that the system flagged the imbalance, a soul too heavy for its housing, and grayed out further mental gains until the meat caught up. Fine. If the flesh was the bottleneck, I'd engineer the flesh. I took a demon-class skillbook's core insight, that emotion itself is fuel if you build the right combustion chamber, and bolted an emotion processing loop onto my mental engine, the 3-cycle method. Then I welded together Battlefield Death Energy Refinement, an entire lost martial arts system from the trial world, flesh modification, and my own conversion models into one composite physical cultivation, which I named the Heart Fiend Body Forging Art, engraved as a book, and let the system grind for me while I drank potions and went pale. Strength up 2. Constitution up 2. Somewhere in there, I also officially became the kind of person who does surgery on himself with a healer on standby. Manhwa held me together through the worst session, blindfolded at my insistence, and following shouted intensity numbers, and if she ever writes a memoir, I owe her a chapter and an apology. The region, meanwhile, was living through its own education. The third monster tide came and went, base difficulty raised to 4 waves now, and rising every cycle, the system turning the thumbscrew exactly as fast as humanity could adapt. The projection someone ran on the World Channel was simple and monstrous. At this rate of escalation, within 3 months, anyone who couldn't qualify for class change would be dead, under 100 million eligible out of 8 billion deployed. The system wasn't running a survival game, it was running a civ. The Tide's forced livestream introduced me to 2 locals worth knowing. One was Peng Kai, a scruffy young man whose entire shelter was a collapsing shack with one obscenely luxurious bed in it. His talent let him gain skill experience in his sleep, and he had spent the entire apocalypse to date unconscious, waking up occasionally to discover he'd leveled. A man after my own heart, honestly. I automated my sleep, he weaponized his. The other was Wu Chen, a middle-aged nobody who fought a level 5 elite like he was walking a dog, never taking a scratch, talent, auto battle. The system fought for him with inhuman precision while he supervised. I filed both names under useful later. They will be. And the Mutual Aid Society got its dose of truth, and I heard the meeting was a bad one. 15 of their elites had gone into the trials. 9 came back. The pass rate for the best resourced, best trained, best guided cohort in the entire region? 60%. And several of the 9 weren't whole anymore. An executive did the extrapolation out loud, because someone always has to. If the elite rate is 60, he said, what's everyone else's? 30? 10? Nobody answered. He kept going, voice climbing. The projections say under 100 million eligible for class change in 3 months, out of 8 billion. And that's just eligible. The trial eats half of those. 20 million professionals worldwide, if we're lucky. He sat back down. Old son, tell me, why are humans so fragile? Tong Lei lit a cigarette and answered the way he answers everything, flat and final, through the smoke. He'd noticed something in his own trial, he said. The difficulty wasn't random. The system read your potential the moment you stepped in and built your apocalypse to match it. The strong got hell, the weak got a slightly smaller hell, and the whole thing was rigged to select, not to save. The talents that look like cheats aren't overpowered by accident, he said. In this system's design, the people without cheats were never meant to advance at all. We're not the players. We're the graveyard the players get chosen from. The room went quiet. Then someone floated the only hope on the table. Lower your own trial difficulty on purpose. Feed the class changers so much information they can only score average and just barely survive. Give up the good ratings, keep the people. It was a real plan. We'd end up using it, but everyone in that room understood what it meant, that the best move against this system was to make your own strongest people deliberately weaker, because the system punished growth harder than it punished mediocrity. That's the machine. That's the theology of the dark. It selects. It does not save. and the only countermove any of us had found was to sabotage our own ascension so more of us could live. So we did what we could to rig the selection. I sat down and mass-produced Hope, 72 guides in one publishing spree. A mental health self-test system, free. Beginner guides to every low-mana class skill I'd cracked, 69 of them, free. And the crown jewel, a full introduction to my own dual circulation method, the only high-grade attribute skill in the world with no class lock, complete with prerequisites and theory. The theory section used mathematics, nonlinear dynamics, topology. The channel's response deserves engraving on a monument. A heaven-grade cultivation technique has descended. Why is no one learning it? Because I opened it and fainted. Even in another world you can't escape math. Mathematics is humanity's oldest punishment, and Lin Wei has sentenced me to it. One brave junior college graduate offered to explain it to others for 40,000 coins, cash up front, and my personal favorite from some scarred veteran of higher education. This reminds me of my topology course. Nobody understood the professor then either. Learn it or don't, friends. The door's unlocked. That's all I can do. That's all anyone can do with a door. And then the system announced the District War, a battlefield where regions would be matched against each other. Entry requirement: having killed a level 6 elite, which narrowed my region's roster to exactly 2 names, and it was time to find out what the rest of the multiverse looked like. The rules were simple enough to be sinister. 10 regions per battlefield, up to 10 professionals per team, 6 hours, elimination format. Every region knocked out pays points to everyone still standing, so the longer you survive, the richer you get. The winning region unlocks something called a continuation battle, a second, harder bracket for champions only. By start time, District 76 had scraped together a full squad of 10, me, Li Jie, and 8 freshly changed professionals including Tong Lei, Mei Hua, sleeping Peng Kai, auto-battling Wu Chen, and assorted specialists whose main qualification was surviving their trials with most of their personality intact. We teleported in and found ourselves on the world's laziest battlefield, a perfectly flat disk of rock 100 kilometers across under a visibly pixelated sun. 10 team spawns arranged around it like numbers on a clock, everyone in plain sight of everyone. The system had not budgeted for scenery. I shrugged and started assembling my laboratory from the components I'd packed, because home field advantage is a thing you build. And then, before a single blow was struck, the battlefield got its education in what 4 weeks of dark survival does to people. Because 2 of the enemy teams were not, in the traditional sense, teams. They were patients. From one shelter, its walls crusted with substances I declined to identify, crawled a creature that had once been a professional. It moved on backward bent limbs, its eyes rolled white, and from its one mouth came several voices at once, sobbing, laughing, begging, all layered. The hazardous terrain had eaten this man alive and left the body running. It spotted a survivor from its own region across the field, brightened, and gurgled the most reasonable sentence it had left. "We're from the same district." When fellow villagers meet, they stab each other, and it charged him with what I will only describe as improvised weaponry. Across the field, a second madman sat on the threshold of a shelter shaped like cotton candy, sucking his fingers, whining that he wanted ice cream, until his mouth unhinged into a 3-meter abyss with a sucker-covered tongue inside it, at which point the ice cream discourse became much less endearing. The sane regions dealt with them the way you'd expect. Nobody wanted to trigger the preparation phase punishment rules, so the first madman got passed around the entire battlefield like a hot potato, lassoed, tornadoed, frozen in an ice coffin, and lobbed from region to region while everyone pretended it was someone else's problem. Watching world-class powerhouses play volleyball with a screaming lunatic while the system's punishment mechanics returned every real injury to sender, that was our introduction to inter-regional diplomacy. Li Jie watched the whole circus with his sword lowered and summarized it in 2 words: crazy race. Our healer, Mei Hua, doctorate in psychology, was asked for professional comment and declined on the grounds that she'd studied children and no child had ever done that. The diplomacy started arriving on our doorstep shortly after, because our spawn had 10 people in it and everyone else's had 1 to 4. First came Zhao Cheng, a haggard chain smoker with a level 5 shelter, hands raised, announcing, "I'm a citizen," before anyone even threatened him. His asking price for full cooperation: cigarettes, and a guarantee we'd let him get eliminated late enough to collect welfare points. His trade goods, the story of his region, and it was worth every cigarette. His region had held 5,000 people when he entered his trial. When he came out 5 days later, the population counter read 1. Him. A fellow regional had gone into his own trial, met something ancient in there, the chat logs suggested a witch, centuries old, and brought her out inside his own body. 2 days later, every living thing in the region was gone. "I'm dead the moment I go home," he said, lighting his next smoke off the last one. "So keep me alive here a while, yeah?" Remember that story. Everyone on that battlefield did. Then came the professionals worth fearing. Kalen and Brendan rolled up on a hoverbike. Kalen, a transforming armor warrior, loud and cheerful. Brendan, a red-nosed man with a beer belly and the class plane prowler, quiet in the way of people who don't need to advertise. And an arrogant flying man named Wu Long, class collector, forbidden grade, who opened negotiations with, "You think you're worthy?" and clearly intended to sort out the top rankings by force. So I showed them the weather forecast. I raised one hand over the open plain and let go of everything I'd been holding politely in check. The magic vortex around me deepened, the ground split, and a 3-meter meteorite of compressed stone rose out of the crack, ignited with deep black flame, and began to spin inside a liquid cyclone of bound air. Then the fire spread, up, out, alive, until a burning storm system the size of a town hung over the battlefield, fire dragons coiling through it, a ring of scalding rain hissing down at its edges where the heat wrung the sky dry, and one enormous eye of flame opening in the clouds to look down at Wu Long specifically. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is this a forbidden spell from a fantasy novel?" Wu Long stood there with his cigarette frozen halfway to his mouth, staring up into the fire like a man rethinking his portfolio. His talent, some kind of information oracle, helpfully pinged him advice at that exact moment, which he later admitted read, "Suggestion: befriend the scholar." He looked at the sky-filling firestorm, looked at me, and gracefully announced he'd be taking second place, actually, and did anyone mind? Brendan settled the rest of the rankings by laying a 3.5-meter object on the ground, silver gray, streamlined, guided tail fins. "Is that a missile?" someone croaked. "B91-13, said Kalen, patting it. 360 kilotons. A nuclear bomb. An actual, physical, made-on-Earth hydrogen fusion city eraser on a magic battlefield next to a pixelated sun. The field cleared to a respectful radius in about 4 seconds. Negotiations concluded themselves, and District 76 was awarded first place by unanimous vote of everyone who preferred to keep having skin. Where does a man get a nuke in the apocalypse? That was the question, and Brendan's answer stopped every conversation on the battlefield. His talent let him revisit places he'd been, including Earth. He'd been back, and the Earth we'd all been snatched from, the home half these people still daydreamed about returning to someday, was gone. Not invaded, not overrun, self-destructed. When 8 billion people vanished mid-task, the automated deterrent systems read the global blackout as an attack, and the first missile launched within 2 days, and after the first, thousands. Then the unmanned nuclear plants let go, one after another, a slow, worldwide fire with no one left to fight it. He described walking through it, empty silos, burning coastlines, cities of ash, with the flat cheer of a man who'd looted a military base out of the ruins of his own species and needed the story to be funny, or it would be something else. The battlefield had started as a competition. By mid-afternoon, it had turned into something I hadn't seen since the suicide note thread. A couple dozen humans from doomed regions, sitting in a circle on stools Tang Lei handed out, trading cigarettes and the ends of their worlds. Everyone had a trial story. Wu Long told his with his eyes going redder as it went. A saintess in his dungeon world, a girl who wept on his shoulder about the demon tide, who at the end, on the altar where her people expected her to sacrifice herself to summon their god, took his hand instead and asked him to take her with him to the new world. She knew where he was from. He refused. His talent screamed at him to refuse, and he ran, and he's been calling himself a coward and her a matched set ever since. The circle listened with complete sympathy for about 5 seconds, at which point somebody pointed out that trial dungeons are region-wide instanced content, meaning his tragic one and only White Moonlight was simultaneously running the same seduction script on every other class changer from his region, and the circle exploded, and Wu Long tried to fight 4 people at once while Kalen laughed himself off his stool. But under the jokes, we were assembling something deadly serious, brick by brick. Story after story had the same shape. At the peak of every trial world sat something ancient, and the ancient things always noticed the visitor, and the ancient things always wanted to leave with them, always through persuasion, seduction, bargaining, never force, as if force were forbidden. My world's will begging to be my vassal. Wulong's Saintus asking to be carried out. Brendan's rogue AI pausing its apocalypse to ask him what lies beyond the universe. Zhao Cheng's region, dead to the last man because someone's ancient thing had succeeded. I fenced our core people behind a fire barrier and laid it out. The trials weren't just difficulty tests, they were exposure events. Every excellent rated survivor came back either alone or as a door. And nobody had a way to check which. Werewolf with civilizations for stakes. Tong Lei went so quiet and so cold that half the circle started edging toward the surrender button because the obvious move, kill every witness before the secret spreads, was visibly crossing his mind. I vetoed it on the practical grounds that the whole multiverse would deduce this within a week anyway. Some information doesn't keep. One more find from that afternoon, tossed off in a sentence but load-bearing forever after. Comparing notes, we realized nobody knew where the class quality names came from. The system never called anything a forbidden profession. That terminology had entered the World Channel through one specific early poster, a person named Su Luo, who kept dropping perfectly timed warnings a day before anyone could have known to need them, and whose hint-shaped messages would keep steering the world for weeks. Someone in this game had a walkthrough. I added the name to my file of things that don't add up, right under the system's rude tone. And then, in the strangest cross-regional exchange of my life, the war became a seminar. While my teammates sparred to test their strength against foreign champions, the losers sat in a circle and talked shop, and the shop was economics. A professional from another region held forth on why stable prices predict survival, and half the circle nodded along like graduate students, and I wandered over and caught the tail of it. Why, someone asked, did so many people in your region die so fast? Chaos, said the lecturer. Unregulated market. 12,000 people, no trust, no stable prices, the same item swinging 4 times in value in a day. Normal survivors couldn't trade for basic resources, couldn't develop, died. He gestured at District 76 with something like awe. Your region kept prices stable. That's why you have double our population left. How do you all know this stuff? Fong Li asked, genuinely lost. Read a few books in prison, one man said. Telecom fraud, said another, cheerfully. That's how I got started in my region. I stood there and revised my worldview in real time. The heroes of the multiverse, as far as I could tell, were disproportionately drawn from the ranks of scammers, ex-cons, and dung beetles who'd learned economics the hard way. And their consensus verdict was that the deadliest weapon in dark survival wasn't a monster, it was an unregulated market. The system had turned money into power directly and instantly. So whoever cornered the market cornered strength, and the Matthew effect ran faster here than in any economy either of us came from. In a region where the strong could set prices by force, the weak never got to stand up at all. The Mutual Aid Society, it turned out, had been quietly running the single most subversive policy available, keeping bread cheap. And it had kept twice as many people alive as anyone else in the room. The battle itself, for the record, the 2 madmen annihilated each other, and everyone else surrendered on schedule, in an atmosphere less like war than a trade conference with occasional screaming. District 76 took first without a single real exchange of blows. The path of survival is undefeated. Why borrow anyone's head? And the points shop paid out titles, treasures, and one item we bought instantly by unanimous vote, a near-death teleport for the next round. Because the next round was the continuation battle, champions only, and every champion team in it would be led by things like Brendan, things like Wulong, things like me. We registered, obviously. The continuation battle spawned us onto an actual planet, real mountains, real rivers, gravity 3 times standard, air so thick every breath felt like sipping soup, and an orange-red star filling half the sky. The moment I stretched out my senses, I knew we'd left the kiddie pool. Besides magic, the environment carried at least 2 energy systems I'd never met. One cool and lofty, nourishing to the mind. One hot and wild, hungry to strengthen flesh and just as happy to damage it. Other worlds fuel, in other worlds air. 10 regions, 10 champions of 10 different survival games. And the first scout contact set the tone. A hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft crossed our sky at 20,000 meters because somebody had brought an air force. I did what I do at the start of every fight I intend to win before it starts. I changed the map. Dozens of storm cores, wind and fire elemental hearts I'd manufactured in advance at a cost that would make an accountant faint, went up into that thick, low sky, and I spun the whole atmosphere over our position into an artificial hurricane, kilometers wide, Wall clouds veined with lightning and laced with flame, my laboratory hovering in the calm eye like a spider at the center of a web made of weather. Wind feeding fire, fire driving wind, the physics of this dense air doing most of my work for me once I'd paid the ignition cost. Lin Wei's first law of warfare: never fight on a battlefield you could have replaced. The neighbors introduced themselves in order of strangeness. First, a courteous man in a top hat and tailcoat who tipped his hat like a stage actor and called himself Silas. Pleasant, polished, and wrong. His lips didn't match his speech. The sounds under the system's translation weren't produced by any throat that grew up next to ours. I flagged him to Li Jie mid-conversation. Possibly not human, possibly one of those things we'd all agreed to have nightmares about. The truth turned out weirder. He was human, from a different survival game. Mist survival, region such and such, where the local apocalypse was acid fog and every shelter needed an acid-proof membrane. He'd assumed we were from his world. We'd assumed he was from ours. The continuation battle wasn't a championship between regions. It was a championship between worlds. Dark Survival was one franchise in a whole catalog. Mist Survival, Faith Survival, Void Survival, Wilderness Survival, Gold Rush Survival. Each world running its own themed apocalypse on the same engine. Shelters, levels, the level 5 trial, the 20 attribute cap. Somewhere, a system was A/B testing species. Second introduction: a self-detonating man. A black-robed person from Faith Survival came screaming out of the sky, plowed through the outer storm at horrific personal cost, landed in front of Li Jie, and exploded with his whole life's power, guided by the voice of his god. The blast erased 50 meters of ground into a glass bowl. It also barely pinked Li Jie's skin, at which point the system's punishment mechanics returned the excess damage, at which point the poor bomber's talent, damage transfer, bounced the return again, and the courteous Silas standing nearby ate the whole rebound and was smashed into a legend in a scrap of cloth. A 3-cushion billiards shot of rules lawyering, and the first blood of the match was drawn by paperwork. The bomber's soul survived, shielded by his god's grace, and drifted, waiting for pickup by teammates who were not coming, and I collected him in a specimen jar instead, because a captured soul is a captured intelligence asset. Interrogation revealed the beautiful, ugly truth. His own 2 teammates, priests of a rival god, had faked a divine projection and talked this devout idiot into suicide bombing strangers, mostly to test our defenses and partly to be rid of him. His god had never spoken to him in his life. He died for a puppet show. I've met kinder worlds than Faith Survival, and I've been to 2 apocalypses. Third, a martial artist called Mountain Tiger, muscles like geology, from Wilderness Survival, who took one look at my hurricane and asked, with holy reverence, which innate master had made it. Apparently in his world, commanding the weather means you've transcended the 20 cap. We did not correct him. Never interrupt an enemy who is busy inventing your legend. And above us all, a silver-white warship the size of a district hung in low orbit, launching missile swarms at anyone who moved. Void Survival's champion, a man named Owen, whose apocalypse had apparently been fought with fleets, and whose ship's main gun was Runt, we'd learn shortly, a legendary-grade laser cannon. The fight, when it stopped being a reception, came in layers. I'll give you my favorite 3. Layer 1, the Dream Assassin. Marcus, the surviving priest who'd puppeteered the bomber, held a talent called Phantom Dream Game. When he neared death, it dragged every comparable fighter within 50 kilometers into his private dreamscape. Forced duels. 1-on-1. 3 minutes each, loser drained of 1/5 of their power. In his own dream, Marcus was a god. He'd farmed his whole region into submission with it. The warship's missiles killed him. The talent fired. 12 of us blinked out of reality into a pure white void, lined up like patients at a clinic run by a smug deity. Marcus had 2 problems. He didn't know it yet. Problem 1. He chose his first victim by looks. He picked the sleepiest, weakest man in the line, Peng Kai, whose class, earned by sleeping through his entire trial, is literally king of dreams. Marcus's opening punch shattered him like glass. Peng Kai reassembled behind him, yawned, rubbed his eyes, and asked, "Fighting me? In a dream?" Then he started renovating Marcus's dreamscape around him. Marcus spent the next minute trying to evict a burglar from a house that was busy becoming the burglar's house. Problem 2. Me. I stood in that white void and noticed my auxiliary consciousness was gone, which meant I wasn't in my dream. I was in someone else's. So I did the thing I'd practiced 100 times at home. I planted myself as a flag, and I summoned. My entire dream world came sliding across the void. Library. Starry sky. Calculation palace. A whole cosmos, docking with Marcus's little white room. His walls bulged, his floor rippled. He watched an ocean try to fit inside a teacup, and the teacup was his mind. And in the seam between his dream and mine, for a fraction of a second, I saw it. Below all the private dream bubbles, connecting them like lanterns on threads, a platform, vast, made of flowing rules and raw information, linking countless dreams across countless sleeping minds. The dream plane the old books promised, real after all, just hung high above my pay grade. One glimpse, then my dream snapped me home. File that under later, much later, but burn the address into memory. Marcus woke back in reality mid-panic to reap his harvest, and the warship's main cannon vaporized him where he stood. It had been tracking his golden glow the whole time, a man with an unbeatable dream and no plan for the daylight. There's a fable in that. Layer 2, the laser. The summoner, a gray-robed necromancer whose shadow familiar shredded alloy hulls bare-handed, boarded Owen's warship, took the bridge, and forced its legendary main gun to fire on my storm. A beam weapon, near light speed. The one thing a hurricane can't stop. On paper, checkmate. Nothing I own moves at the speed of light, but I didn't need to. I needed to be standing in the right place a second early. Our quiet teammate Yang Jian had a talent that catches and redirects one attack aimed at him, and Wu Chen, the auto battle man, could time anything to the microsecond. So we parked Yang Jian on a black meteorite, directly in the beam's predicted path, and Wu Chen conducted. The sky turned white. The pillar of annihilation crossed 40 kilometers of space, touched one man's outstretched hand, bent 180 degrees, and went home to its mother. The warship ate its own main cannon broadside. Armor, weapons, hangars, vaporized in a single line. Owen's near-death teleport yanked him and his flagship out of the match. The summoner's shadow familiar died in the light, and his whole power set died with it. I flicked one meteorite after his fleeing shadow, on principle. 2 regions, 1 borrowed sunbeam. Yang Jian survived his catch with burns he'll describe at parties forever. Wu Chen got a nickname on 4 worlds. Afterward, Tong Lei stared at the wreckage falling out of orbit and said something that itched. Why did their tech tree have laser dreadnoughts and hypersonic drones, but no nukes? He was right, and the answer mattered. Their technology wasn't discovered, it was granted. Dispensed by their system in balanced tiers, attack matched to defense, with the civilization-ending shortcuts quietly left off the catalog. Every world's power, ours included, was curated. Someone upstream of all of us decides what's on the menu. Add it to the file. Layer 3, the Siege of the Storm. Silas had survived his own obliteration. The man we'd met was a puppet, and the real one had been 3 kilometers underground the whole time. He assembled a 5-world coalition to crack my position, on the correct theory that otherwise we'd win. His pitch to the others was a small masterpiece of lying. The storm's creator is weak, half dead, propped up by potions and a healer. He made that pitch while I already had his number. He also made it in front of the mecha pilot from Gold Rush Survival, a pragmatist to his chrome bones, who was quietly recording every word to sell later. So the coalition's spearhead punched into my storm. Mountain Tiger, the martial artist, and the Blood Skeleton Taoist, a cultivator whose battle banner was woven from 10,000 harvested souls, which tells you everything about his home world. They smashed through my collapsing wind wall into the eye, expecting a dying man. They found me at my window, holding my freshly laundered robe, unbothered. Because the collapse was the trap. The storm hadn't been a shield, it had been a lid. All that wind had held 6 hours of accumulated fire in suspension, and I let the lid off. The horizon caught. A black fire domain, 10 kilometers wide, 8,000 degrees and rising, swallowed the battlefield. No air inside, no ground, just plasma, and my meteorites arriving on subscription wherever my 2 guests tried to stand. The Taoist's demon aura burned off him like tissue. His soul banner spent its prisoners by the hundreds to keep him breathing, and when he cursed his own ally to buy himself 3 seconds, cultivator solidarity at its finest, Mountain Tiger punched him unconscious out of pure professional disgust, then tore off his own head to trigger his near-death teleport. That's the kind of decision a man makes when a fire domain has renegotiated his relationship with hope. The Taoist's escape triggered a breath later, 2 more regions cooked in my kitchen. Li Jie spent the match doing Li Jie things. He dueled the 4-armed muscle monster across 20 kilometers of shattered rock, a berserker whose talent turned injury into strength, and whose voice, after the 3rd throat reconstruction, sounded exactly like a sped-up cartoon minion. Then he unzipped him with 1 clean horizontal cut, the instant the clouds I'd parked overhead blinded the monster's shockwave sense. And when Silas came to collect his pre-agreed 2nd place, Li Jie said nothing. He just played him the recording the mecha pilot had sold us. Silas's own voice, plotting against us in his own accent. Then he beat the most elegant man on 4 worlds out of the tournament with his fists. I scored it as diplomacy with excellent production values. Before the last eliminations, though, I did something better than fighting. I held a meeting. I dropped the fire domain to a calm circle at its heart, conjured a plain metal table and 4 chairs out of my laboratory wall, brewed tea from air and dust, and invited the survivors. Silas, before Li Jie beat him out. The mecha pilot, Li Jie, me. 4 champions of 4 worlds drinking bad tea in the eye of a firestorm, comparing notes on the machine that runs all of us. Their tea was purified water, by the way. I keep forgetting the leaves. Nobody complained. You don't in a fire domain. The mecha pilot's world ran on symbiosis. No classes, no skill books, just a living metal shell that evolved by eating high-grade ore and winning fights. His free attribute points went into the mecha, which meant his actual body was fragile as glass. I asked what happened if someone stole the mecha's bond. He didn't know. Just cut me open, he offered. I said, is that allowed? He went quiet. Silas's world ran on magic, like ours. His skill books were learnable in my system. The martial artists weren't. Which told me something. Worlds sharing a power system share a little of the machine underneath. The mecha man had no skill books at all. Everything emerges from the mecha, he said, and shrugged his chrome shoulders. How can you be sure the warship wasn't the same? Silas mused, and it was the ship that grew, not the man. We stopped joking after a while, because the pattern was too clean to laugh at. 3 things every survival world shared. 1. The core game is survival, always built around a base, shelter, warship, sanctuary, whatever they called it. 2. The level system is identical, and level 5 is always the great trial, the same cliff on every world. 3. The attribute cap is 20, everywhere, and breaking it always costs a special contest. Characteristic dungeon here, reversing innate there, baptism, golden core, a dozen names for 1 wall. And the strangest shared thing, the trial, the exact same trial. Thrown into a dying world, made to taste despair, and selected, on every world, in every language. What, said the mecha pilot, flat as pressed metal, is the point of it? Nobody had one. 4 champions, 4 apocalypses survived, and not one of us could say why the machine did any of it. We drank our water. The fire burned quietly around us, and I filed the whole meeting under the same growing heading as everything else. Someone built all of this, and none of us have met the architect. Then Li Jie beat Silas out of the tournament, and I looted a Dead Region's automated factory for 100 cubic meters of that 12,000-degree alloy, and we finished the job. We took first again. Another 65 points, 3 more titles, including Creator of Fire Domain, which I did not choose but have decided to deserve, and a world-level reward that mattered more than all of it. Because our world took 34 first places across the bracket, every region on our entire world got 2 extra characteristic dungeon slots per day. The gates past the 20 attribute cap tripled for everyone because the champions delivered. Steelmen the newcomers, and the newcomers widened the gate. I'd been preaching that in the World Channel for weeks. Now it was arithmetic. Oh, and I looted the battlefield on the way out, obviously. The Dead Factory Region's automated mining site yielded 100 cubic meters of an alloy that shrugs off 12,000 degrees. I named it Alloy Number 3 after its home region, melted it into ingots with my fire domain, and stuffed it into every teammate's shelter for the ride home. My laboratory was about to get a hull upgrade courtesy of a civilization that drilled for ore with diamond-tipped sticks while owning starships. Granted, tech trees produce the strangest fossils. And on the ride home, in the afterglow, Li Jie and I had the conversation we'd been avoiding, because the taboo existence deduction had a local address. Guo Tian, thousandfold Guo Tian, protagonist template Guo Tian, had gone into his trial around when we did, and since coming back, silence. No trades, no posts, no movement. Not dead, his avatar still lit, just still. For a man with a pathological need for attention, silence was the loudest possible alarm. If something ancient had come home wearing him, it was living in our region, behind level 5 walls, with a talent that duplicated anything 1,000 times a day. Deal with Guo Tian first, I said. Li Jie nodded. And I sent a message to the Mutual Aid Society that I'd been drafting in the back of my head since the District War, since Brendan's stories of home. I need to know everything your former military people remember about strategic weapons stockpiles, locations, conditions. Because my shelter was still on Earth, and Earth, ruined as it was, had one export left that no survival world could match. Here's the thing I'd been sitting on since the beginning. My shelter was never destroyed. When I used my ticket in that provincial library, the system integrated the shelter into the ground, the basement, specifically, or possibly the underground parking garage, which in the largest library in the province had civil defense reinforcement. And when the first Monster Tides Guardian ranking scored my shelter integrity at 100%, that wasn't just a funny exploit, it was a status report. My house was fine. My house was in a fortified basement on a nuked planet, one universe over, waiting for me. And you can teleport home. Brendan had proven it. Earth was reachable. The forced teleport ticket, the loot ticket, would drop a survivor at another player's shelter without consent for 24 hours. Pointed at my own coordinates and I'd have a door to Earth, assuming the system didn't flag it as a bug and, in keeping with its personality, delete my house out of spite. But Brendan had gone home and come back with a nuke, and the system had let him, so the risk was acceptable. We sent Fang Li, one of our sturdier professionals, through Deng Bo's shelter, which we'd relocated to the safe zone next to my dungeon, making Deng Bo our permanent logistics hub, the honest man finally living his childhood dream of being professionally useful to someone strong. Fang Li teleported home to my library basement, confirmed my shelter sitting there intact in the dark, sealed it in a protective alloy shell, and stepped outside into the ruins of my hometown. His report: the city was wrecked but not glassed. No nuclear airburst, the strikes aimed here had been intercepted. Only shockwave damage, overgrowth, the quiet of total absence. And when number 2 of the Mutual Aid Society, a man with old military connections and a colder read on the world than most, heard "not nuked," his reply was pure bleedership. Naive. Cities and transport hubs were all targeted. They were just intercepted. Then he sent Fang Li into the Western Mountains, to a third front deep storage facility from another era, hidden and hardened, to retrieve something specific. Fang Li brought back 2 hydrogen bombs, roughly 3.3 megatons each, and through a chain of coded messages between old comrades who'd survived across scattered regions, a friendship network operating over the world channel in wartime cipher, because in the apocalypse your address book is a strategic asset, number 2 had found the models he wanted and talked our man through liberating them from a mountain that no longer had a country attached to it. I want to be clear that I then wrote a tutorial. It exists. Somewhere in my notes there is a document titled, in effect, How to Modify Your Hydrogen Bomb at Home, complete with the reassuring note that this is not a skill you'll need in daily life unless you happen to be fighting a nuclear war. I stripped the arming locks and casing off the core, confirmed the old fusion configuration was still stable, wrapped it in constant spells and alloy number 3 and a location tracking enchantment, and rigged a little handheld trigger. A small tactical nuke I could outpunch bare-handed by now. A 3 megaton fusion device I could not, and would not want to test the difference at close range. Even Li Jie, with his absurd defense, would be vapor at the epicenter, but a little distance and we'd both walk away. Then I strapped one to a man's back and flew to Guo Tian's house, because that's the plan I'd built with Li Jie after a great deal of serious discussion. If the taboo existence had escaped inside Guo Tian, if the thing that murdered Zhao Cheng's entire region was living behind those walls, I would not negotiate with it. I'd introduce it to Earth's last export at 3 megatons. His shelter was a small palace, level 5, but gorgeous, more ornate than most level 6s, because the man had bought beauty with infinite money. The door was dented, not breached. Some survivor had tried to loot the silent rich man and failed to even open his door. Li Jie removed the roof with one blade arc. I fired the alloy-clad nuke through the gap on a tracking spell, watched it lock onto the only human inside, and we held our breath with a finger on the trigger, ready to detonate the district clearing option if anything came out wrong. Nothing came out. So we looked inside. The interior was 10 days of undisturbed dust, 7 towering piles of identical items, 3,000 of each, 1 pile per day, his thousandfold talent dutifully producing lamp oil and daggers and potions for a master who had stopped collecting them. And on the once luxurious couch, curled in a ball, filthy, unmoving, was Guo Tian. Alive, barely. His body running on empty, his consciousness gone dark, incontinent and wasted, a man who had come home from his trial and simply switched off. I sent a thread of mind into his soul, and I finally understood. He was drowning in psionic light orbs. He'd found one in his trial, an SS rank power core, and his talent, seeing an item he owned, had multiplied it 1,000-fold. 1,000 power cores, all trying to chimerize into one soul at once, all rebuilding him simultaneously in 1,000 directions. His soul had been served the infection process 1,000 times over and had simply drowned in it, overwritten past the point of a driver, thrashed into a coma by his own golden finger. Guo Tian, protagonist template, thousandfold cheat, secret cheater terror of the region, had been beaten to death by his own talent. Not killed, just unplugged. Held down forever at the bottom of his own blessing. It wasn't a taboo existence, it was a tragedy with the safety off. But I had to be sure, and I don't take a coma at face value. So I did what I'd become uniquely equipped to do. I pulled him into a dream. I'd built him a scenario, a rebirth, the fantasy every reader of his kind of story secretly wants. He woke in his trial world, early, before his mistakes, with the beautiful princess summoning him, and I salted the dream with tells, the princess's uncanny blankness, the system's suspiciously generous rewards, the childish simplicity of saving the world. Any of a dozen absurdities should have snapped a lucid mind awake. I even nudged him over and over, disguised as characters in his own dream, whispering that none of this was real. He didn't care. He beheaded his enemy on the high platform, to a stadium chanting, "Savior." He married the princess. He got a system message declaring his world real and true, a reward of an entire world. 10 years of peace and prosperity, and vows of eternal love. And he sank into it like a warm bath. And I had to reach in and drag him out by force. I woke him on my lab table with a knife in the abdomen. Sensory confirmation, the one thing dreams can't fake. He screamed, thrashed, and finally understood. The reality was the pain, and the dream had been the paradise, and I'd shattered the paradise on purpose to test whether a monster was wearing his skin. There was no monster, just Guo Tian, awake, and reality waiting for him with its arms crossed. And here's where the story turned into the darkest thing I carried out of this whole month. Because I let him go. I told him honestly, I'd looked into his dream, seen a man willing to save a world, and I believed he could be an asset to humanity. I handed him a return ticket and told him to leave and develop properly. He could genuinely be a low-tier, top-tier professional if he tried. He tried. He went into the hazardous terrain alone and nearly died. He trained cronies and joined the district war and got kicked to pieces by strangers from other regions. And then he came back to my door, hollow, and asked the question I'd been dreading, because it meant he'd figured out something about himself I couldn't unfigure for him. Lin Wei, let me go back to that dream I control. I refused. I told him fantasies were a trap. And Guo Tian laughed and told me the truth about a certain kind of person, and I'm going to let him say it in his own words, because I've turned them over 100 times since, and I still don't have a rebuttal. My whole life was unremarkable, 18 years like an NPC. Then I got this amazing talent, and I felt like the protagonist, and I lost. I lost everything, even the trial. That's reality. Now let me go back and be the hero of my own world. Don't look down on me, Lin Wei. There are so many people like me. Scrolling my phone, reading novels, daydreaming in class, all of it just to live in a fantasy for a while. I don't want to struggle, and I don't want to be mediocre. Let me be a hero somewhere. Even if it's a mirage, I'd give everything for that dream. The world denies me, so I deny the world. For me, now, returning to reality would be the cruelest punishment there is. Thank you for listening. Let me embrace my life. So I did. I gave him what he begged for. I engineered his dream to run stable and real feeling and permanent, tuned the time flow, sealed the exits, and left him inside it forever as the savior of a world that loves him, married to a woman who never leaves, cheered by crowds who chant his name. And I kept his body in my lab, modified to need no food and no waste, breathing quietly, running on ambient magic, a permanent installation. His soul's 1,000 orbs became a research subject. His talent became a project I handed to Deng Bo to study. And Guo Tian, protagonist of nothing, got to be the protagonist of everything, in a bottle, forever, and shook my hand goodbye through the dream. With a grin, I still can't decide how to feel about. I've built a lot of things this month. That one I don't put in the guides. Was it mercy? I ran my own psych test afterward and scored below 90, and had to lie in the grass emptying my head until the numbers came back. I've been noticing lately that the scoring criteria I keep having to revise to stay healthy are all bending the same direction: colder, more composed, harder to move. People change on the road to power. I'm just, per my own instruments, a slow burn. The slow burn kind. It said so right there on the panel, in a color I'm learning to watch. While I was doing all that, the World Channel kept scrolling its news, and one story out of it belongs in this recap because it's the thesis of the whole system told as a horror short. A professional called it a legendary little story, serialized over 5 days because the World Channel caps message length. Region such and such, Professional A, ruthless, resource-hungry, changed class first and led his 100-shelter fusion community against the monster tide as their protector. The cooperative path everyone had been told was humanity's best hope. And Professional B, handsome, capable, who'd helped A before the change, whose long-lost father A first boiled and then killed, for reasons the storyteller left as an exercise for the reader. B smiled and said, "Well done." And when the tide came, B survived to wave 10, alone. Walked outside his shelter to deliberately trigger the Lone Warrior debuff, the same debuff the system used to torment me, the one that strengthens the waves by 3 tiers, and summoned a Wave 11 boss-class horror down onto the 100 merged shelters. Over 100 people died in the livestream, A among them, B among them. A murder-suicide with a civilization for a bystander. That's the system I've been living in, stated plainly. It doesn't want cooperation. Every mechanic I've met rewards the individual and punishes the group. The Lone Warrior debuff turns any resentful civilian into a doomsday device. The trial's information rules turn every senior professional into a threat to every junior. The whole architecture is a machine for manufacturing suspicion. And I've offended this machine personally since day one, when it stole my house. But somewhere in the last month, it stopped being personal and started being universal. The system isn't cruel to me. It's cruel to the concept of us. So I posted my counter thesis to the World Channel, and it's the closest thing I have to a creed. Do everything in your power to keep the newcomers alive, and pay attention to the other worlds. Because the continuation battle rewards are counted per first-place region, not per capita, more professionals means more qualified regions, means more champions, means more gates opened for everyone. Steelman the weak widen the road. It's not charity, it's the only winning move on a board designed to make us eat each other. Su Luo, the walk-through-shaped stranger, immediately confirmed it and hinted the world rewards would soon go far beyond dungeon slots, which I've stopped finding surprising and started finding ominous. And then, because the system likes to underline its points in red, the World Channel produced one more horror before I close this chapter, from a region called 34679. A professional had come back from his trial 2 days earlier, posted a single photograph of something to the regional channel, and gone silent. The region's population began to fall, not to monsters, to the photograph. Because the thing he'd brought home worked through sight itself. To look upon it was to be looked upon, and to be looked upon was to become it. Its image spread through the forums and channels like a virus with a lens, and everyone who browsed it out of idle curiosity was already gone. A survivor named Arthur clawed together a fragile alliance of the last few lucky ones who'd been careful enough not to look, and made a plan to survive the 5th monster tide together and quietly give up before drawing attention. And when the forced live stream switched on, he opened his allies' broadcast rooms and found the same pale, lifeless, staring face in all three. His alliance had been 3 of its puppets the entire time. There had never been anyone else. It had been playing solitaire, and Arthur was the last card. He laughed until he wasn't Arthur anymore. Region population, 2. Then it stopped mattering. To gaze is to exist. To gaze is to dominate. To gaze is to end. I read that region's obituary and thought about my own trial, about the world's will begging at my viewport, about the 1,000 things that want out of the dark and into a person. And I checked my psych score, and I went back to work. Because working is what I have. I built my region into a fortress against exactly this. Free knowledge, mental health tools, a logistics hub, an honest man at its center, a soldier king and a scholar consultant holding the top, a whole culture of survivors who tag me in the channel to say they're still alive, my idiots, the lamp donators, the pants inspectors, most of them still breathing when 88% of the world isn't. That's not sentiment. In a system engineered to make us devour each other, a region that refuses to is the single most subversive thing you can build. Keeping them alive is the fight. Everything else is homework. Which brings me, finally, to the edge of the world. Because I'd learned the last threshold. The 20 attribute cap that walls in everyone. The characteristic dungeon slots we'd tripled. The hazardous terrain eating 2% of the region and spreading. All of it fenced us inside our own regions. And to break the fence, to explore outside the region at all, the system set one price. Defeat the level 6 boss that patrols the border. The Overseer, the Watcher, a 10-meter guardian, strength 19, one of the border guards I'd been warned about on my very first day in the dark, back when I was crawling toward a light with a sausage in my pocket, and the mere photo of one had made the whole channel despair. A month, that's all it had been. 1 month between the naked man clicking his light switch while 8 billion people vanished, and the man whose flying laboratory was about to ram a border god at 5 times the speed of sound to punch a hole in the edge of a world. I took my laboratory, hull rebuilt in alloy number 3 now, silent, faster than sound, and quieter than a whisper, up to the border where the giant waited in the dark, and I did not open fire. I aimed the whole fortress at it and accelerated. The Overseer was fast for its size. It dodged, then braced, gathering magic in its elbow for a counter that would have swatted an ordinary shelter out of the sky. Then my laboratory cut a physically impossible right angle in the air and hit it like a dropped planet. Hundreds of tons of alloy at hypersonic speed folded the giant into the mountain behind it, snapped its spine, boiled its blood from the impact. It went berserk, healed, roared, locked its curses onto me, and my curses found only empty sky because I have equipment for that now. I rammed it again while it was still standing up. I buried it in its own collapsing mountain, and when it finally exploded up out of the rubble in a killing frenzy and swung its whole enraged arm at the incoming silver cube, its right arm burst apart against my hull, and the fight had barely begun. Ask me how it ended, and I'll have to tell you the truth. I don't know yet, and neither did the giant. Because that swing, that shattered arm, that was the opening exchange, the border cracking open, the edge of the region giving its first inch, the door to everything past it just starting to move. Beyond that door is the rest of the multiverse I met at the war table. Somewhere out there, a level 20 Morningstar wizard is still holding an inheritance he swears I'll want at level 10. Somewhere the dream plane hangs under every sleeping mind, and I've seen its address. Somewhere, a system decides what's on the menu for 8 billion people and 80,000 regions, and it has patched my exploits 4 times personally because I keep finding the doors it forgot to lock. I started this whole thing as the one man the apocalypse forgot to pack, left at the station holding my pants. And now the edge of the world has an arm off, my laboratory's engines are still spinning up, and the dark past the border is full of things that don't yet know a scholar is coming to read them. The system stole my library on day 1 and told me to fend for myself. So I'm going to go read the whole universe instead, starting with whatever's screaming behind this giant. First page of a much longer book. Here's the thing I'd been sitting on since week 1. When the system's bugs snatched me and left my shelter behind, that shelter didn't stop existing. It generated exactly where I'd planted it, in the basement level of the provincial library, and my guardian ranking readout during the first tide had confirmed it. Integrity, 100%. Somewhere across the void, in the ruins of my homeworld, stood the only shelter in the multiverse that had never been attacked, sitting on top of the largest knowledge vault in 1,000 kilometers. My original plan, my library cheat, had never died. It had just been waiting for logistics, and the system store sold logistics. The forced teleportation ticket, the survivors had already nicknamed it the loot ticket, delivered you to the outer edge of any survivor's shelter, no consent required, 24-hour stay. Any survivor's shelter, including one located technically on Earth. The only reason I'd never dared test it was the fear that the system would flag homeworld travel as an exploit and patch it, or worse, patch my shelter. But Brendan had been going home for weeks on his talent, openly, and the system hadn't blinked. Precedent established. The door was legal. So we mounted the strangest expedition in regional history. Fang Li, one of our sturdiest new professionals, chosen for durability and obedience, burned a loot ticket targeting my shelter and materialized in a pitch-dark underground parking garage on a dead world next to a modest system-built structure that happened to be the most traveled real estate in 2 universes. He photographed my shelter inside and out, untouched, dusty, patiently holding my week 1 canned goods, then sealed it in a protective stone shell, went upstairs, and stepped out into the ruins of our city under the first open sky any of us had seen since the deployment. The city was wrecked, but standing. Shockwave damage, not fire. The interceptors had done their job before dying, and the warhead meant for downtown had hit a chemical plant 20 kilometers out instead. When he reported that, our number 2, ex-military, the society's quiet old fox, answered with the weariest sentence of the whole war. There's no such thing as luck. Cities were always targeted. They were just intercepted. Home hadn't been spared. Home had defended itself to the last automated breath for an audience of nobody. Then Fang Li flew west into the mountains, following coordinates from number 2's old boy network. And I want to preserve the logistics of that intelligence because it's perfect. Number 2 did.